Are we being recorded? Who is being the administrator for this meeting?
That's me. Can you hear me? This
We
is
can hear you,
Tasha.
yes. Are we being recorded
Okay.
yet?
No, I was waiting for you to start. I can start now.
Okay. All right, good evening, everybody.
Recording in progress.
This is the October 11th, 2022 meeting of the Mansfield Town Council, and I'm calling this meeting to order. We have a little bit of a change in format today. Our town clerk is with us virtually, not wishing to expose any of us to whatever the grunge is that's running through her family. So I appreciate the effort, and the next item on our agenda is the roll call. Sarah Ann, can you do that from your distant location?
I sure can, Mayor. Thank you. All right, Osberger,
Mr. Osberger is not feeling well this evening.
Berthelot, Bruder,
Here.
Coleman,
Here.
Cotton,
Here.
Frattoni,
Here.
Moran,
Here.
Shuren,
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of the September 27th, 2022 minutes. Is there a motion to move approval?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Mr. Coleman moves to approve. Is there a second?
I'll
Ms.
second.
Berthelot seconds. Any comments, corrections, changes? All those in favor of the minutes as presented, please raise your hand. Unanimous, thank you. Opportunity for the public to address the council. Is there anybody here from the public who wishes to address the council?
I'm not aware of anybody.
Do we have any communications from anybody that would be appropriate in this?
I
For
don't
this
believe
segment?
so.
Okay, we'll declare that section of the agenda closed. The next item is the report of the town manager, Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, our Human Services Director, who you'll be hearing from tonight, Pat Schneider, is retiring at the end of the calendar year. And with that time more quickly approaching than some of us want to admit, it was definitely high time for us to initiate the formal recruitment process. So we met with Pat, and Holly Schaefer was a part of this discussion before she officially departed as HR Director. And we updated the position profile and got that job announcement out far and wide, and so the application period has opened. Incidentally, I know that several members of the council are interested in social services and human services programs and functions in particular, so if there are job boards or resources that you want to make sure that we put this out on that we haven't already, definitely feel free to follow up with me and let me know what those resources are, because we want to encourage a very broad and diverse pool of applicants. So the deadline for candidates to apply currently is October 28th, and obviously depending on what the applicant pool is, just as we did in the case of the Planning and Development Director position, we may extend or alter that deadline as needed to build a robust enough pool. Likewise, on the theme of management team vacancies, the Director of Human Services, Holly, as you all know, last week was her last week, and so Lee Palmer, he overlapped with Holly last week. He's our new interim Director of Human Resources, and so he's hit the ground running, and this is his second week with us 3 days a week. He's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we'll be finalizing that job description as well and looking to start that recruitment process, which is obviously an incredibly important position for the town. Myself and our Director of Planning and Development and the Director of the Downtown Partnership participated, I think it was last week. It was recent in any case, a meeting with the leasing management team and a planner slash landscape architect for Eastbrook Mall. They have a number of ideas for redevelopment of the mall, some pretty significant concepts that they're batting around. I wouldn't want to go into some of those concepts. In this meeting, they're very preliminary, and it was shared with us in confidence, but suffice it to say, there's some very intriguing possibilities, including some multiple use kind of options that are being considered for that property at the southern, southeastern end of our community. The mayor and I, as well as Jen Kaufman from Planning and Development, took part in a meeting with the Schifrins last week. They invited us for a tour of the Kirby Mill, and I myself had never been inside. As a family, we enjoy walking around that area and certainly appreciate the outside of the mill, and the waterfront that they have along that property is spectacular. But had often wondered, heard stories about what the inside was like and what the goings-on were, so we got to look behind the curtain. And actually, for all the time that we spent there learning about the mill, there were still pieces of it we didn't see, so now there's an excuse to go back and see a little bit more. But I won't speak for the mayor, but speaking for myself, again, very interested in learning the history, learning some of the thoughts and objectives that the Schifrins have for the property, and we'll see where ultimately some of those ideas go in the future. I want to give the council an update that since we've kind of gone behind the scenes after a presentation with you all for the Municipal Facilities Needs Assessment Study, we have been working with TSKP since that presentation to the council to basically start to iron out what the next steps might look like. To a certain degree, no next steps will really begin until we come back before the council, because the funding that the council approved for the first phase, as I just said, goes with the first phase. Any second phase of the project is additional funding. You'll recall that there was some funding requested as part of our Rescue Plan Act proposals, as well as funding that was included in the approved CIP budget for this year. But we'll be coming back before council with proposals, what the next phase, some of the next steps might look like, and particular emphasis on community engagement and active listening in our community to share some of these ideas that were presented to the council and get feedback from various stakeholders, a wide, hopefully, subsection of our community on how close we've come to hitting the mark on some of these alternatives that we've looked at. Hard to believe we're 4 sessions in, looking for our 5th one this week of the Mansfield Local Government Academy. Time flies. This past week, Human Services hosted at the Senior Center, and this week they'll be at Station 307 to learn about fire and EMS. And closing in on the halfway point of the program, really impressed with the level of engagement amongst the registrants. We have 20 people this year. The mayor, I know, was interested in seeing the DPW garage, and so she came along to that session. I think that was night 3. But a very engaged group, and really great to see the amount of interest and just the questions. This is not a group that you have to work particularly hard to get a rise out of them, get some questions flowing. So that's great. Very excited to announce that while we have not entered into a contract yet, there's just a little bit more due diligence to do. Essentially, we have an agreement in principle with a firm known as 110%. They're a Colorado-based firm. They are subject matter experts in master planning and financial sustainability for parks and recreation programs. So we did a competitive RFP process. Ultimately, after vetting a few different firms, we all collectively agreed that 110% is the best fit. Certainly those client communities that we reached out to for references and learn about their experience really had overwhelmingly positive, favorable things to say about 110%. And the people that sort of populate the firm, and there are some subcontracting firms as well, but the core group really, the lion's share of their work is with municipalities. And that was one of the things that separated them a bit, because there are some groups that operate in kind of a recreation space, but they're more geared towards nonprofits or the private sector. And these folks understand what it is to operate a Parks and Rec program in the public sector and what it is to make good on revenue recovery goals to cover your operating and capital expenses. So I'm really looking forward to getting that process started. We may, or we are going to be somewhat measured in our departure from the starting gate because we have a number of staff in Parks and Rec that are in key vacancies that are either away on maternity leave or just received a promotion internally, and so we're backfilling their old position. And so we really want to make sure that that core management group within Parks and Rec is fully staffed. And so we're going to work to do that with the expectation that we'll launch into the Parks and Rec master planning and financial sustainability strategy development process in the next few months. The October issue of the town's bi-monthly newsletter was published on Monday, October 3rd. Big thanks to Margaret Chady, as always, for all the tireless work she does behind the scenes, working with department heads to get content pulled together for that publication. The second round of funding, local business relief funding, is now officially live. As a reminder, with the council's support, we have broadened the eligibility criteria for the second round. All the businesses, all the types of businesses that were eligible the first time around are eligible the second time around, but we've also now included nonprofits that can demonstrate that they were impacted by the pandemic. So we're expecting, hopefully, a robust response to that window, grant application window, which is open until October 28th. And I think in the interest of time, I will stop my report there. Oh, other than to say, for those that are interested, we have officially signed the contract for the new ambulance 707, which council approved funding for from Rescue Plan Act funds in recent months. And so that has been spec'd out. And we have executed that, and hopefully we'll be moving forward with the construction of that ambulance in the very near future, because as the council knows from all our discussions about the Quint, won't be anywhere near as long as the Quint. That's upwards of a 2-year time period to get it online, but these things do take time. They don't come to us right off the shelf. So I'll stop there and field any questions the council may have.
Questions for council members? Mr. Coleman? No. There's, of course, a lot more detail in the manager's report. So anybody who wants to know what's going on in town, this is a really valuable document. So no questions for the town manager? Then we will proceed to reports and comments of council members. I'll add my comments about the Kirby Mill. One of the things that I've always found most interesting about the Kirby Mill is the project that they have constructed to provide hydropower to 250 households. They have developed a special small turbine which can be basically dropped into place wherever there's a river, and it generates electricity. It's a very exciting project, and we got to see the turbines. I got to look at the outsides of the turbines, big blue round things. So it's
And I don't know about you, Mayor, but I was absolutely following every technical detail that Sam shared about the inner workings of the turbines and the patent technology. 100% didn't lose me at all.
yeah, they get very excited about those things. They're really wonderful. And the other thing I wanted to comment on was the Public Works tour. It was a really interesting evening. There are lots of places in town I have seen, but the Public Works garage was not one of them. So I want to take advantage of that. The program is clearly, Mr. Aylesworth has structured a really intensive program. One of the things that is so impressive about it is the enthusiasm of town staff for spending 2 hours, extra hours in the evening talking about the work they do. And one of the things I found is that everything sparkles. All of the trucks in Public Works sparkle. And it's because our employees take pride in their tools, and it really makes a difference, and it's visible. And I think that it speaks very well of all of our management that not only that the course is underway, but that what they are seeing really reveals a very well-functioning town government.
Do
Pleased
you care to
report-
share your opinion on the facility itself, Madam Mayor?
Needs to be replaced, no question. It's old, it's small, it's dirty, it needs different kinds of facilities. The only question is, are we willing to pay? What's the design, and are we willing to pay? So we'll obviously be working on that over the next year or so, because it clearly is part of the proposed upgrade of town facilities. So, any other council members have comments? Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, I noticed in the Mansfield October newsletter, there was an article, very nice article about our newest council member, Dr. Carlita Cotton. And she brings a great skill set to the council. But I'd like to see this, as a precedent, where all of our volunteers on the council, committees, boards, commissions, get recognized. I'd like to see further write-ups on all our volunteers in town. Thank you.
Well, there are about 250 of them, so it would take us quite a while to get through them all. But you'll see later on this agenda the beginning of such a thing. Anybody else? Nope. Okay, there is no consent agenda. Under old business, we have a new school construction update. Mr. Aylesworth, would you like to bring people up to make that presentation?
Happy to, and while folks are coming up to their seats and getting comfortable, just to kind of frame this discussion. So the council, some months back and periodically since the beginning of the project, has received kind of a catch-up substantive update, if you will, from the school building committee and the owner's project manager on the status of the project. I think everybody is certainly aware from a wide range of communications and certainly just living in town that the project, has experienced some challenges. And of course, our original goal and target was to open the new elementary school for this school year, right after Labor Day. And that obviously is a deadline that's come and gone. And so we continue to adjust, and the school district and others, obviously are central to all this and figuring out when we can get in the building, when it'll be completed. So without any further ado, I guess, Randy, am I turning it over to you first?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm joined also by our project manager, Adam Levitas, who's online. And we'll start, I think, Adam, we're going to start with some pictures.
Randy,
Yes.
before you do that, would you
Okay.
explain to the council exactly what Adam's role is, what his responsibilities are?
Right. So the first thing we did actually as a building committee was hire professionals that know the building process, they know the trades, they know how to work with the state, because state paying for 60 or so % of this project, and so they have experience with the entire scheme of things that happens in a building project. So they are professionals that oversee things. They interact a lot with the GC on the project, the Newfield Construction, who is actually building it. They provide people that actually are at the construction site, kind of overseeing things. They manage the budget for us, make sure everything gets turned into the state, and we can get our reimbursement and things like that.
They also negotiate prices for us on
I will-
occasion.
I would let Adam talk about that particular role, but they do review. So whenever there's like claims for change orders and stuff like that, they review those claims, make sure that we're not being overcharged. They will refused some of those. They said this isn't really eligible, and this is really not our problem to pay for this, and so they do have that role as well.
To touch on that point, good evening, everyone. Adam Levitas with Colliers Project Leaders. With regard to change orders, negotiations, things of that nature, yes, Colliers, along with the architect and design team, TSKP Studios, reviews change orders as they come in addition to proposals and pay applications and things of that nature, to assure alignment with the scope intended for the invoice or for the potential change order or whatnot. Sometimes, yes, we'll identify that something should not be the onus of the owner to pay. Sometimes there's portions of scope that would be or would not be, or there's a misalignment between the intended scope to be changed versus what the pricing is coming back as. And sometimes there's just pricing that's seems extraneous or burdensome. So as part of that preliminary process, we assist the town with reviewing and then ultimately put it before the committee to make a decision as to whether or not that's a cost and a change that the committee feels is beneficial to the project and they want to take on, or is duly owed to the contractor based on the terms of the contract and the situations in the field. And just in general, to expound a bit on the role of Colliers Project Leaders, as Randy said, we do a lot of consolidation, documentation, basically helping to serve as the town's point people for the project. These types of projects are very burdensome to just a staffing level for any organization. And so Colliers comes in to help assist the town with actually managing a project of this scale without having to take time away from town staff, and to provide that level of expertise, whether it be from financial review of elements like I just talked about, coordination with the state. We have field representatives who are on the construction site that have vast amounts of construction experience, as well as former design professionals, things of that nature that can help identify the gap between a contractor delivering a building, an architect designing a building, and then the owner who needs to be represented in terms of the needs and wants and ultimate occupant of the building. So that's our role for the project.
Thank you.
All right, so we have pictures to show of the building. I think we can go through those, and Adam has got some then follow up on kind of the steps that need to happen to so we can take occupancy and ownership of the building.
Since I
yes.
can only see a very limited number of people on this screen, if somebody wishes to speak, they'll have to speak up. I'm going to ask that questions be held to the end of the presentation. But in any case, if you need something and I can't see you, please speak up.
Randy, you want me to just flip through these and narrate, or do you want to speak to these?
Well, I will start. If I miss something, you can join in. So here's a drone view of the building. You can see the building up towards the top in the central portion. A couple of other things that you'll notice from this sort of view is that Field C in the back, at the top there, yeah, that was used as a laydown area for the contractor. That year has been moved away, and that field is being prepped for sod, which will be going down really soon, to return that field to service to the Little League in the town. Closer in the front, you see the area that's going to become the parking lot. There are curbs going in. It's been leveled out. They are expecting to start putting down binder, I believe, next week on that site. And there's also plantings that are going to be going in, I think, ahead of the binder getting laid down there. Okay, you can move on. Another view, you can see that there is binder that's laid down of on the bus loop that comes around to the front of the building. That the little area there that with dirt in it, and then in the middle of the loop that does have some trees that were added into there today. So there are plantings that are going in now. You can see some of the areas where there are prepping for more sidewalks to go in alongside the building as well.
And just to provide a general overview of the building components, this would be your main entrance area here with the administrative offices. This portion to the right here, this silver portion, that's the referred to as the A wing of the building that houses the pre-K and K components. We have the C wing here that has the media center, the cafeteria area, as well as the gym. And there'll be interior photos that will show you these areas as they exist in a moment. And then this larger section back, which you'll see better as we rotate around the building. This is the B wing, largely housing the first, second, third, and fourth grade classrooms.
Right. The B wing is the two-story portion. A wing is single story, closer to where the old Southeast School was. Another view, you can see that the binder from the bus loop area comes around to the, there's a delivery area in the back. The solar panels are up on the roof. I don't know, anything else, Adam?
No, not necessarily with this view. One thing I would add to as we rotate around the building here is there's a substantial portion of the building that's an outdoor area, both for playgrounds for the younger kids and some of the older kids just off screen, but also just some outdoor paved areas, things of that nature, which serve to provide both educational and play opportunities outside the building on the south side here. You also can see a little better in this view the pump house and those facilities which help to serve for the fire pump areas, as well as serving as the interchange for some of the utilities, along with the interior mechanical rooms and the geothermal wells that are up here to the north of the building. And that next collection of photos is basically wraps around the building exterior a bit from grade level.
Right, so this is the single story portion. This is the pre-KK wing. This on the south face. The area to the left there that's got, looks like gravel on there, that's going to be a pre-KK playground. As soon as the playground for the older kids is done, which is going to be fairly soon, then they'll start putting in that playground there. And then of the B wing, the two-story section, this part of the building is basically done in terms of the exterior. You can see that there are sunshades on the windows. The soil has been laid down for seating. So as for an external face, that is basically done. And same here. This is coming around the corner to another portion of the two-story area. Again, you can see some of the same. The sunshades are up and the windows are all in. And that's actually the reverse view of what we just looked at. There's a window up there, and then so this would be the view out of one of those classrooms along the side of the building. This is the glassed area in the back is where the cafeteria is going to be. There is a patio outside with pavers, and it looks like about 3/4 done in this view. This was last week. But those pavers are going in as an outdoor area for dining. The siding on there is called Ipe. That's the wood siding. You'll see more of that on the gym when we come around the other side of the building. But that is up. There is a little section of that siding that needs to go on the one side of the gym yet, but otherwise the siding is all done.
Just for orientation purposes, this loading dock is what you would see at the end of that paved drive that we saw in the aerial view, not the bus loop, but as it kind of looped around the building. That terminates here at this patio area. So we're moving sort of counterclockwise around the building right now. So this is just another shot from the rooftop showing that paved drive. So the patio area we just saw is just off screen here to the bottom right. And so this gives you a better, closer view of the pump house and some of the ongoing site work around that eastern portion of the building.
And this is at the main entrance. There is a canopy that is there, so the bus loop comes up there along that sidewalk. The kids will be able to get out of there. There's a canopy. There's going to be some sidewalk that goes underneath of that, and then alongside the building. It's wood. It's quite beautiful appearance to it, but that's the view coming out the front door, looking towards the road out there. And then reverse angle, you can see the canopy there in the front. The main door is right there. That door is not in yet, but that is where the main entrance of the school will be. This is the Library Media Center. You can see that there's lots of glass to the outside. There's a glass enclosed classroom toward the back up there in the middle. Skylights that are going to bring in lots of natural light. Clearly, the ceiling tiles are not in here yet, but there's paint on the walls, and otherwise, largely, it's in process. This is the view from near the main entrance, looking down in the area that's going to be the cafeteria. The library, so you can see the glass we saw from the outside before. That paver patio area is out just beyond that, the glass windows there. The Library Media Center is in those windows to the left, immediately close up, and then farther back you see there are windows for the gym. We'll get around to see more pictures of that later. The serving area for the cafeteria is in the bottom right, and there are rooms for some of the specials up on the next floor. Yeah, so reading, OTPT, and things like that. The ceiling is in there. You can see the glulam beams and the wood for the panels that go between the beams. And you can see the clerestory windows. So one of the features when you walk into this building is there is a lot of light, a lot of windows that bring in lots of natural light, and so it's like the light is really pervasive in there. And the porcelain tile flooring is in now in the cafeteria.
One thing I would add, just as we start walking through the building, is there are some portions of the building that look farther along than others. For example, some of the classrooms in the lower level of B, you'll see more typical paint on the walls, but in other locations, like you can see here, there's locations that are painted, some that aren't painted, and that's pervasive as we walk through the building. But as Randy pointed out, one of the recent items that was completed was the floor in this area, which was good because that could only be completed after they had finished all the high work, and they could move their lifts off of this location.
Looking at the rooms for some of the specials, reading and so on, in the cafeteria, serving area is down below the kitchen. And then looking from the opposite end, this is over by those glass windows at the far end of the cafeteria, looking back towards the main hallway where the entrance is. And again, you see really pervasive light coming in.
And once again, just to help orient everyone, the main entrance to the building is just past these windows through the media center, past the media center over here. So we're currently standing in C wing with the gym and the cafeteria, looking back towards the heart of the building with the main staircase. The remainder of the bulk of B wing is off to the left, and then the A wing is just straightforward in screen.
And from the floor of the cafeteria, looking back up at that entrance. So the windows at the end of the cafeteria right behind where that picture was taken. This is in the gymnasium, kind of from one end looking back towards the stage. The cafeteria is off to the left. You see some of the windows on the left side there. Also plenty of windows up around all around the top. A lot of the kitchen equipment is there. There is a little table which is just kind of sitting there. That's not its final location. There's a hood behind that is installed towards the back. And the walk-in cooler is adjacent to that. That's installed. That was one of the items that was a problem with procurement. We ended up going to a second vendor so we could get it more quickly, but that is now installed. And the main stairs. So this is coming from the cafeteria. You would reach those stairs and then go up to the right, would go to the front entrance, and then to the left, you'd go up towards some of the classroom wings. So this is a classroom from the lower level B. That section of the building is probably more along, farther along than most of the other sections. You can see that the ceiling is in, the light is in. There's whiteboards on the walls. The millwork is in, the cabinets. There's and it's maybe a little bit hard to tell, but in the window there is a light shelf that helps reflect light deep into the classroom. And so the main thing that's left to do in these rooms is the flooring.
Talk more about the flooring here in a little bit.
Another lower level B classroom. Again, you can see some of the cabinetry in. There's some shelves around the windows. There's a bench in front of the window. Whiteboards are in, lights are in, and so on. And then looking from closer by the windows, looking back towards some of the lockers that are built in there. Another lower level B classroom. And this is the hallway, lower level B. So even though it's an interior hallway, you can still see there's an awful lot of natural light that gets through to that hallway. And this is one of the breakout areas on that level. There's areas outside the classrooms where teachers can bring students out and do special things that are different, with small groups and so on. The right is, I believe that's a teacher work area with the windows looking out onto this breakout area. Now we're up at the upper level. You can see that the ceiling is different up here. We have the vaulted ceiling, got the glulam beams, the wood paneling is complete in some of the classrooms, partially in some of the others. And again, you got the very large windows, the light shelf, some of the whiteboards are in, and so on.
Some of the acoustic, many of the acoustic panels have been installed. You'll notice that these upper B wing areas are slightly behind the lower B wing, which and the upper B wing is slightly ahead of A wing, just as the sequence of construction was allowed to progress due to weather enclosure of the facade and the roofing, etc. So the lower level B, which was protected more so from the elements, got a head start ahead of some of the other areas. So that's why you see some components in the upper level B classrooms that are not as finished as the lower level B areas.
And then some of the lockers for students are there, the cubbies. And here's one that the ceiling is not quite complete. They don't have the wood panels up on between the glulam beams.
Many of the delays in some of the mill work were attributed to the heat wave that came through. There are certain criteria for installing millwork, and if it's extremely hot and extremely humid, I think sometimes temperatures range to over 100 degrees, especially got up near the ceiling on the second floor with sun baking in and no mechanical equipment yet turned on. They couldn't install the wood paneling without causing issues, so that needed to be delayed. So that's why it's not yet installed in some areas, but it is in some others.
And then if you turn around from the main windows, each of the upper story classrooms has the clear story windows up there that bring in light. So even the classrooms that are on the north side of the building will have south-facing clear story windows to bring in light. And then this is in the pre-K wing. This is area A. See again that don't have the wood up on the ceiling. The acoustic tiles aren't on in yet. There are some of the millwork is in, like here you see the little cubbies in place. And other cabinetry. And then the lavatories are basically done that are there in each of the classrooms. And then the hallway in that area A, you can see the mechanicals are in the ceiling. They don't have all the ceiling panels in. There's actually a stack of them there on the right side that will eventually end up getting put up into that ceiling. But you see, this is wing A. It's slightly behind wing B. And then this is the breakout area in wing A. That's got the large skylight that's going to bring in lots of light. The windows are in the teacher's area behind there, and so that will be used as a breakout area. And the administration offices. You can see those offices are probably the farthest behind of anything right now. So there's cabinetry there. It hasn't been installed. Ceiling panels need to go up and things like that. This is the infamous DOAS unit, the outside air source unit. That was delayed by a number of months. We had to leave a path for that to get brought into the building and installed. That's in now, and it's connected. And that's a unit that exchanges the inside air with the outside air. And another mechanical room. This is actually where the geothermal input comes into the building. So those big pipes like right in the middle, they come in there, and then there's all the heat exchange that happens in that area.
You can see the heat pumps here. There are 30, it's either 32 or 36. I always get it messed up. Heat pumps there that work with the geothermal system to actually service as the heat exchange for the building. So the DOAS unit we talked about, as Randy mentioned, is for dedicated outdoor air. The heat pumps is what actually provides the conditioning of the spaces.
And then just some of the other finishes. The water fountains are in, IL on the walls, next to the lavatories, sinks and things like that. And the playground, this is the playground for the older kids. Much of it is done and installed. They're finishing that up, and then they would move on to the pre-K playground following that. And again, back to the parking lot where the curbs are going in. Okay, so those are the pictures we have for you. Adam, you want to talk about some of the next items that are up?
Yeah, so to give the committee, or I'm sorry, the council, a sense of where the project is at, the most recent billing that's being reviewed from a monetary perspective puts the project at about 85% completion in terms of work installed. That's building and site. The sort of things that, in my mind, and what I try to convey to the committee and at the owners' meetings in the trailer on the site is the 4 focal points of the project to kind of compartmentalize where everything is moving. And those focal points change as items become complete or become more important to finish. Currently, the items that are being kept in top of mind are the site and exterior, the general completion of the interior components, the flooring, which you previously mentioned, and the mechanical systems. In terms of the site, the parking lot area that we had seen initially, as well as some of the plantings, is a key focal point. The parking lot is going to be required as part of a potential occupancy or the eventual occupancy of the building. And so having that area complete with pavement before the winter weather sets in and asphalt pavement is no longer procurable from the plants is a key focal point. So you saw that some of it has already been put down, but they need to finish that parking lot area before the November period when the asphalt plants close. Similarly, there are plantings going in throughout the building right now, or throughout the site right now. Sod should be installed this week at the Field C in the back corner of the site. as well as a number of trees and things of that nature. However, not all the plantings will be installed as part of this planting season. It's too late for some of those elements, and they'll have to be deferred to spring. That won't necessarily stop the opening of the building for certain plant elements, but just ensuring that whatever is installed is properly installed, maintained, and then is properly established moving forward is important for the project. Otherwise, it'll need to be replaced by the contractor if it doesn't survive the 1-year warranty period. For the envelope, a lot of the concerns have been able to be resolved insofar as enclosing the building. There were a number of issues that came up in terms of window installation, coordination of various components to meet the net zero goals of the building. The building is extremely tight from a detailing and airflow perspective. So a lot of quality assurance and quality control was done by means of testing and whatnot to ensure that it actually performs as designed. And some of those elements need to be reworked to actually meet the specifications of the project. So many of those issues are behind us at this point. But it did take a substantial amount of effort to get to this point based on just the overall progress of construction. In terms of the general interior, as you saw throughout the photos, there's a sort of a spectrum of areas being complete versus not complete. You have the lower B classrooms, which you walk in minus the floor, look fairly done, so to speak. And then you have areas where it's very clearly unpainted drywall, areas where the ceiling isn't installed, there's electricals that hasn't been hooked up. So all those areas need to be finished before you eventually see students in the building. For the flooring, I had mentioned that was a topic to come back to and is a very key focal point. The flooring throughout the large portion of the building is a resilient tile flooring material that gets effectively glued down to the concrete surface. And one of the key quality components to that is ensuring that the adhesive works well between the concrete flooring as installed and the actual flooring product. And a key component to that is the preparation of the concrete surface. And there's a number of tests that are done by the manufacturers before they provide a warranty to ensure that the proper bond is achieved. So that way you don't install the flooring, it looks all great, and then 2 years later it's starting to delaminate because the adhesive didn't work. So some of the initial tests for those flooring samples didn't meet the specifications. So as part of that process, you have to work with the contractor must work with the manufacturer to identify what different floor preparation processes need to be undertaken, whether it be a primer, so to speak, like you might prime a wall before painting it, whether it be some sort of grinding, whether it be a self-leveler to help change the surface of the concrete itself. These are various steps that need to get through, and so far the proper preparation has not yet been fully confirmed. So that's why there aren't any floors yet installed, because that final agreement in the preparation process has not been achieved. That's actually something that we as a project team are reviewing additional testing that the owner might be able to do in advance of, in addition to any manufacturer tests or the contractor's tests, to ensure that the ultimate product is satisfactory and that we understand that the bond will last and will match the project specifications and requirements. And this is a critical issue because the flooring is, with the exception of some of the tile in the bathrooms and the tile in the cafeteria and a small carpeted area, the flooring is pervasive. So that will need to be finished before furniture can come in, before final touch-ups and paint-ups and all these things are done. The flooring needs to happen, and the preparation needs to first be identified and resolved, and then completed, and then the flooring installed. So there's a fair amount of work to complete there before those rooms can be closed up and finished up. And then the final of the 4 categories is the mechanical systems. As Randy alluded to, there was the several months delay with the dedicated outdoor air system. That component, as well as a number of other mechanical components and electrical components, are a bane to the construction industry right now. And this is not unique to the Mansfield project. It's not unique to Connecticut even, where across the nation, there are components where a project team will be told, hey, this is arriving on XYZ date. XYZ date comes and goes, and then the project team finds out, oh, you'll get it several weeks later or months later. We're not sure. So thankfully, with the dedicated outdoor area system, it did arrive and it's being hooked up now and starting through its testing phase. But to that point, there are a number of other systems that couldn't be finalized until some of these components were received and resolved, whether it be due to procurement, like the dedicated outdoor air system, or whether it be just lack of finalized progress throughout the project site, whether it be variable frequency drives that help to run the system, the installation of some of the other building components and the heat pump components, valves that are required to help flush the system and install some of the liquid coolants and things that go through. All these items have to be checked, and there's meticulous checklists the commissioning agent provides and monitors and observes along with the mechanical engineer and the Colliers field construction rep. And so far, there's been a number of issues where the mechanical systems just aren't done yet and are just starting up. Some of the startup and testing phases that would have been started up much earlier in the year. So moving forward, as I mentioned, the project is, at least from a monetary perspective, approximately 85% done. The original construction completion date was targeted for July 2022 of this year. That date was shifted to August 12th as a result of some of the market-wide issues with metal roof deck delays. But even subsequent to those documented procurement items and resolved procurement items, there have been others that have not yet been formally formalized and resolved, like the dedicated outdoor air system, as well as additional risks and unknowns for some of the procurement items. For example, we have got a generator that still isn't on site. There's still components missing. There are plans being developed to work around that generator in terms of a temporary system and temporary unit while the permanent system is being resolved. But that's an item that needs to be resolved before the building can be occupied. And as of right now, Newfield, the contractor, has been told week in and week out with updates with their manufacturer, oh, it's coming, and it hasn't yet arrived. In addition to some of just the procurement issues, there's been a lot of work that needed to be corrected. For example, as you saw around the building, a lot of those zinc panels were in place. Those were the metallic silver looking panels. As part of some QA, QC, some testing was done by the project team of some of the facade areas. And one of the areas had air leakage in it that was far exceeding what was going to be acceptable. That area had to be reworked and focus drawn from other areas of the building in order to fix that portion of the site to ensure they met project specifications. Another issue was the main staircase, where it was constructed by one of the subcontractors and didn't meet code compliant portions of how high the individual stairs were. It needed to be shifted and redone in order to meet code compliance standards. That's not something that's acceptable to the project from a quality perspective, a safety perspective. They needed to be redone. And while that's certainly not the fault or cost to the owner, it did delay portions of that portion of the building as rework needed to happen there. And an additional, there's just outstanding work that isn't the result of external forces like market-wide procurement issues. I mentioned some of the mechanical works and components that aren't complete, or some of the drywall or some of the painting. There hasn't been any delays or from the manufacturers or things of that nature. They're just not as far along as they were scheduled to be. And we have been monitoring, we being the project team, the TSKP, the architect, their engineers, Colliers as the owner's representative, where we've been asking the questions, identifying the deficiencies in the scope, and bringing these up because when we review pay applications from the contractor, when we review the inspections done, whether it be by the testing lab or by the building official or the engineers or what have you, if something doesn't meet the project specifications, it doesn't get approved, it doesn't get paid for. So all of these items continually have been coming up and have resulted in the building that is not yet complete. And as we discuss here tonight, we don't have an estimated time of completion just because the schedule updates from the contractor have not yet given us a clear indication of when all of the outstanding unknowns and unknown unknowns and outstanding risks can be resolved to result in a firm completion date that's reliable and actionable. Newfield, the general contractor, has been notified of some of the deficiencies in the work with regard to just your more run-of-the-mill quality assurance reports and things from Colliers and the architect and the engineers, as well as some more formal items that some of the work that's been installed that's been rejected due to lack of compliance with the work that needs to be remediated, as well as just conversations with Newfield's leadership team with regard to contract completion and the completion dates. Right now, the contract date that's been formalized is August 12th for when the building should be occupiable. It is past August 12th by 2 months. And while there's an understanding that there may be some extensions in times warranted due to some of these other procurement items, those have not been formalized, not been reviewed yet, and ultimately need to be reconciled, as the contract indicates that any completion dates beyond those in an agreed upon extension of time will result in potential financial consequences for Newfield as the contractor. So those discussions, have started and are proceeding. But ultimately, it's a focus on ensuring that whatever components are in the building meet the requirements both of life safety and code compliance, any appropriate regulations, and just the project specifications and intent that was sought after by the town when pursuing this project. With that concludes the overall summary I have. Open to questions from the council.
Thank you. That was extensive and complete and worrisome. Mr. Shaken, followed by Mr. Bruder.
Thanks. You mentioned a few items that were time-sensitive paving issues specifically to the season, and so with obviously everything's time-sensitive because we'd like to get the school open as soon as possible. Are there enough outstanding things that require temperatures to be above freezing that how confident are you that those items can be resolved in the next, call it, month before we run out of warm weather?
The critical component that I mentioned with regard to paving, there's about a month left in the paving season. With regard to what needs to be complete, is there sufficient time to do some of that paving work? Yes, there should be. And as of right now, there isn't an immediate concern that it's going to fail from a timing perspective for paving per se. However, as we know from just the expectations of the project for the last 9 months or 10 months or so, there's been a lot of expectations that haven't been met and reasonable timeframes that haven't been met for various reasons. So as of right now, the conditions at the exterior of the site with regard to paving and then some of the other site required elements for planning and zoning regulations, engineering regulations, things of that nature, they aren't in dire straits, so to speak, but it is an item that's being monitored because of its importance to the ultimate occupancy of the building.
And understanding paving, is the building itself sufficiently enclosed that all of the necessary work on the interior can continue once temperatures have cooled down? For example, that ceiling installation, I imagine there's temperature constraints on the other end of the spectrum as well, but perhaps now compared to in July and August, there's heating in the building, and so those constraints may be mitigated. So is all the interior work capable of being finished without a delay based on weather?
Yes, the mechanical systems are starting up now and starting to get some of their testing done now, particularly with an emphasis on heating. Because of the delay, they weren't even able to start testing for some of the cooling components of it And some of that commissioning will need to occur next year after the building is complete. But with regard to heating in the interior of the building, I don't foresee a concern with it being too cold to do work on the inside. The building envelope is sealed up, and they have means to provide if any, if there was a cold snap next week, for example, there's means to provide heaters and things with the building enclosure as is until in the very short term, the mechanical permanent mechanical systems are finalized. So I'm not particularly concerned about that element of it, no.
And then just finally, my last question, I know there's not a firm date, but can anybody share our sort of current hopes and dreams? Just something, people are curious, I think, in the public to have a ballpark. The last time there was a ballpark was in the spring when we announced the plans that we're doing now, our contingency plans, and folks were told, we're hoping for Thanksgiving. It sounds like that's a unlikely hope at this point. So is there something that we're hoping for now, at least, that we can tell the public?
At this point, there's not a date or a trajectory that I would be comfortable sharing based on the information I'm provided by the contractor.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I think in the next, we give it a month, make sure we got a parking lot, make sure that the mechanicals are up and running. I think we'll have probably a better sense, being able to make some kind of prediction.
Thanks.
Mr. Bruder?
Thank you. And my colleague has asked some of the questions I was already thinking of, but just to be specific with the pavement, there's not a date in which the contractor has given you for that to be final, to be wrapped up. They're just feeling like they're pretty confident with when they can get it done.
They have, they've been installing, it's called binder. It's the course underneath the wearing course of pavement. That's been ongoing and is scheduled to continue over the next several weeks. We just received a draft schedule update that corroborates that. So based on the amount of required paving work and the general time frame for how long that takes and the available time, that's what the basis for the watching that scope, but not ringing the bell, so to speak, as it not being able to be completed. That's what that's based off of.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Coleman?
I wish I could put this in a nutshell, but I really can't. I have many questions, and some of them are historical. But on the flooring on this report, the adhesive, I just want to make sure that dusting condition doesn't have anything to do with it.
The dusting issue that's been the sort of the colloquial term that's been referred to, that is part of the adhesion preparation issue. So there was it's not been formalized with testing. That's some of the test results that are outstanding, and some of the additional owner side testing that we're looking to conduct. But as you mentioned, the colloquial dusting issue is the overall scope of ensuring that the surface at the top of the concrete is compatible with the adhesive.
You refer to some of the work as deficiency. I see it as shoddy workmanship. It's appalling. I look at the engineer reports and the architect reports and the photographs. I'll go over this in detail. I have nightmares looking at that stuff. It's, how do you get to a deficiency? Is nobody even looking over the job? I mean, some of the deficiencies or shoddy work, how do we get to that point to begin with? Is there any oversight going on the job at all?
So the first line of defense for quality assurance with any job is with the contractors themselves, whether it be the subcontractors foreman or the Newfield general contractor superintendents. of which there are several on the job site. With regard to the engineer reports, the Colliers reports, that's the QA/QC to ensure that the supervision is being done. So anything that arises in those reports is the result of either a lack of compliance with the contract documents in the first place, or a lack of oversight and supervision to actually ensure that the work meets specification. Sometimes things are caught as they're being installed, but on a project of this size, if it makes it into a report, it's because it's failed to be resolved through the subcontractors and the contractors' first lines of supervision and oversight.
Okay, about the water. Is water being served at our concession stand from the 2 new wells?
I believe so, yes. I think Alan Corson might, if he's there, he might be able to speak more to that, or Bill Treach.
Yeah,
but I believe-
I think Alan is on. I think he shows up as the device that's town. Yeah, there we go.
Hi, water is on at the concession. It's not set up for public consumption so much as it is for the toilet flushing and so on, but it's still being tested there, and it's testing as adequate for use.
Okay, so it's not being served to the public.
Not through any means of water cooler or anything like that, no.
Okay. There's a lot of extra material on the site. I see a lot of material leaving that site. There's some very nice gravel and some very nice topsoil. Where's it going? And is the town getting paid for that material that leaves the site? I would think that'd be worth some bucks.
I'm not sure what specific components. There may have been items that were brought on site as part of fill that were just additional to what was required for the site. I know that, for example, recently there was some gravel brought on from the contractor for the, or maybe it's not just gravel, but stone type material for the warning track for the softball field, for example. So they may have brought too much on site. But otherwise, in terms of cuts and fills, we have the site civil contractor, the landscape architect, observing and watching all of the soils that are graded or brought or moved around the site in compliance with the project plans. There shouldn't be any, and none has been observed in terms of en masse removal of fill or stone that wasn't supposed to leave the site.
So there's no surplus material leaving the site.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Questions for the school building committee? Why was the low bid overlooked on the owner's representative RFP in 2018? Construction Solutions Group was potentially half of what Colliers International was. Construction Solutions Group presentation, from what I could see, was comparable to Colliers International. Colliers didn't even follow the RFP instructions to provide value of each stage of the project as requested in the RFP instructions. Maybe I can get an answer from the chair of the school board on that.
I think that the chair of the committee is probably in the better position to answer that question.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, yes. So we had, when we were hiring the owner's project manager, we had 2 different firms that bid on it. One was cheaper than the other. We chose Colliers because of the breadth of experience that they had, because of the manpower they brought to the project. And the committee unanimously felt that their ability to manage this project was superior to the alternative.
Given that VOCs and heavy metals have been found in the previous and the most recent wells on the site, were the Mansfield landfill and the Old Town dump taken into consideration during the site selection process?
So you're worrying about the potential for VOCs in the water. We did not, I mean, we paid attention to those sorts of things. We were more interested in the, the site qualities itself. Southeast School had been on that site for many years, had really good record of water cleanliness. And so we paid attention to that. There was, we did some soil testing as part of the due diligence and to make sure that the site was clean as well.
And there was a study by Professor Black back in 1979 identifying a plume, a toxic plume of heavy metals and other contaminants. Did anybody look into that? I am truly concerned that the toxic plume could migrate in the direction of the school site. That's one of my major concerns with the site selection at the moment.
Well, and I don't know if Alan has anything to add to this, but as part of having a school site there, you have to test the water routinely. If there was anything to start contaminating the water, that would be found. And then we follow whatever remediation guidelines would be required.
I hope we all keep an eye on that. Geothermal contractor, and this gets into why we possibly might be as delayed as we are with this school. I mean, this is unacceptable. But if we look at some historical stuff, the contractor responses are months and months. It takes months to get the contractors to do what they're supposed to do. One example is the geothermal contractor was asked for as-built drawings on the trenches and the loops on 12/14/21 by the consulting engineer firm Collar Ronan. They were submitted and rejected 3 times. This process was still not resolved on 7/29/22. That's 8 months after the first request. What was wrong with the as-bills? I mean, can you share why 3 as-bills were rejected?
Adam may know more about this. Part of it, I think, with those was that they submitted the documentation as a PDF rather than in the more appropriate electronic format. I don't know, Adam, if you remember that particular one.
One of the instances I believe was with regard to overlay of material or information on top of the relevant material information. So, if pipe A is supposed to be here and pipe B is supposed to be here, there was other information overlaid on top from the original CAD file, I recall, as being one of the issues. So the mechanical engineer could not view or easily view the material that they were to review. To Councilor Coleman's point, that is an extremely long time to receive that content, which is why it continued to come up as an item outstanding to get a resolution. And there, although that might be a more extreme example from a purposes of time, from initially being asked to do the resolution of said items, that is the delay between requested information and the resulting, the resolution of said questions or said issues has been long for many items on this project, which is why TSKP Studios and Colliers and the Kohler Ronan and the other engineers continually bring these items up to get resolution, because they haven't been resolved in what would be perceived as a timely manner in a number of ways.
Okay.
Mr. Coleman, could I interrupt just for clarity? It's been my understanding that we catch these faults through Kohler Ronan, through Colliers, and through TSKP. You are our backstop on this, that if they weren't identified by the people who are representing the town, then we would not have known about the problem. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay, let me go on. Again, more delays. The question is, do these delays lead to other delays? A faulty link seal in the fire protection pipe, it took 5 months to repair. Like I said, does that lead to further delay on other things?
Some issues compound, some issues do not. So for example, I know the link seal issue that you're bringing up from the Kohler-Ronan report. That was a topic that there aren't necessarily subsequent work items that are heavily dependent upon that being resolved. So although it was outstanding for a number of months, it didn't impact some of the other critical path work that would drive the end portion of the schedule within that 5-month period. However, other items, for example, if you had an issue with your fire sprinkler pipe and you didn't resolve it, well, then you couldn't finish the subsequent work underneath it, whether it be the ceiling or whether it be the nice finished floor that you would need to put a lift on to go finish the sprinkler pipe work. So there are, amongst all the items identified in the reports, there's a blending of items that both would and would impact the schedule. Ultimately, all culminating between procurement issues and completion issues and quality issues in the fact that the school did not open when it was intended to.
It seems like a lot of people tripping over each other on that site. Might have something to do with the delays. It also noted that the geothermal piping wasn't insulated per the contract. Was that resolved? And again, that took 5 or 6 months. That probably held up work as well. Now, this next one irks the crap out of me. And there's no excuse for this, all right? And the pictures and the evidence show it. The fire protection sprinkler piping was stored outside for months and months and months, all right? It even has debris on the inside, and it was pretty well rusted, okay? And even fill was pushed over the top of the fire sprinkler pipe. This is unacceptable and cannot be accepted and will not be accepted. That pipe cannot be used in our school. It's not safe, and I hope it's rejected. Has anybody looked at those pictures of that sprinkler pipe? Make you sick.
I believe those images were presented to the building committee as an example of a problem that we were having, and that, of course, the building committee and our representatives demanded that that be repaired.
Repaired or replaced? It's got
Whatever
dirt inside
whatever
it.
was necessary to meet the specifications of the building code, the inspector requirements, and so on.
Are you happy with it, Madam Mayor? Are you happy with that sprinkler pipe?
I don't know anything about the installation of sprinkler pipes, except they should be correct.
They can't have silt or dirt in them.
If our representatives are saying to us that the installation is incorrect and the installer must correct it, which is what I understood those reports to be when they came to me as part of the school building committee, I understood that that meant that these problems had to be corrected, and that the problems would continue to show up on the reports that came to us until they were corrected. And if they were corrected, then there would be a note, corrected. So I think it's a little bit disingenuous to look at all of the reports that our advisors are giving us about the problems that they are demanding be corrected, and accuse the building committee of being insufficient.
I'm not
That's
accusing
my-
the building committee
It's
at
my
all.
understanding that those presentations were indications of actions on from our representation, people who are representing us, and there are multiples of them, by the way. Colliers is one that does the general, but Kohler-Ronan is responsible for certain other specific things, and there are others who do other work. But anyway, I think it's important to understand that the nature of the reports that we are getting, which indicate that our representatives have found problems, the nature of those reports indicate that the problems must be corrected and will not proceed until they are corrected. Ms. Berthoud, I saw your hand earlier. Sorry.
Mayor, through you, Mayor. I've heard a great deal of serious concerns But what I'm hearing from the mayor and from the building committee and from Colliers, that this is how the process works. That when things are identified as not executed as the way they were supposed to be, for instance, the stairs, that obviously was a huge issue. Would have been very, very dangerous if that wasn't caught. It was caught. It sounds like it's been addressed. This sounds like another thing that's been addressed. Through you, Mayor, the list is exhausting at this point. We've heard a great deal, and I'm not really sure if there's any benefit. And I would ask, through you, Mayor, that Mr. Coleman be asked to summarize what it is he's getting to, rather than continuing to list problems, so that we can continue with the conversation.
I will note that we have spent nearly an hour on this, and I would ask that you do summarize. If there are more specific questions, I think those are questions that might be more appropriately addressed to the school building committee.
Let me just ask, is that
Excuse me,
sprinkler
just
pipe
one
in the
moment.
building? That's a simple question. That's part of the question. Please let the contractor or the
Go
owner's
ahead.
representative answer the question. Is that sprinkler pipe installed in our building that was sitting outside for 5 months?
I don't think that no one from Newfield, the general contractor, or Kohler Ronan is at the meeting so far as I'm aware. But whether that specific pipe was remediated, cleaned, prepped, whatever was needed to be installed, or whether that pipe was replaced entirely, any pipe that was installed and inspected and approved would have met any required codes. But whether a given pipe in the photo was completely replaced or completely cleaned and met specification, I can't comment on that specific item. That would be a question for Kohler Ronan and the contractor.
The engineer's note said it was completely unacceptable too. I agree with the engineer.
Can we allow another council member to ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. So we've just heard a lot of very specific issues, and I see in our packet, we've got a copy of minutes of the last school building committee meeting and then a weekly construction report that Colliers provides to the town, which has a number of significant issues that seem to be working to be addressed. Councilor Coleman, in this meeting, in our meetings, I understand that the school building committee has been attending, has made some comments publicly in Mansfield Facebook groups, et cetera, sort of calling into question the integrity of the project itself, the quality of the building. Has there been anything that was mentioned this evening in questioning to you, with the exception of a professor's report from the 70s about a water quality on that site, that did not come from a report that you raised as our representatives when you inspected the contractor's work as a means to require them to fix something that they had done deficiently, or that the building committee, is there anything that was learned through some other source than by you, Colliers, or TSKP, or anyone else that the town has hired to look after our interests, didn't find on their own and bring to the school building committee as an issue that they know needed to be remediated and that they'd instructed the contractor to remediate?
Could you restate the question? There's a bit in there.
There's a lot of issues, and I see some of them in our packet in the weekly construction report. Some of them Mr. Coleman asked about. Are there anything that came up tonight that we didn't find out about collectively, the public didn't find out about through the school building committee's public meeting process, through you as Colliers or TSKP and your team identifying a problem with the contractor's work and bringing it to their attention as something that needed remediation?
No, and let me know if I don't answer your question. The items that identified in as either deficient or what have you, whether it be ongoing during construction or items that came in through the initial due diligence process, the environmental site hazard assessments and other testing and things, those have all been part of the school building committee packets and continue to be so. So you see every Colliers report that gets published, every TSKP report, all the reports that I get from the various subconsultants get submitted as part of the committee packets as part of those submissions for the biweekly meetings and whatnot. And additional items or letters as they come up are generally shared with the committee as part of their packet materials. There's a lot of documents, but for example, everything that has been discussed tonight, some of the items that Councilor Coleman brought up, and the items I discussed are generally shared either in the packet format or in the discussions in the committee meetings, in the owner's trailer meeting, et cetera.
And my follow-up question, thank you, that's helpful, is we're obviously all very disappointed in the delay. I sounded very much like you were, Adam, as you sort of explained where you view the project in terms of when it's supposed to be done. But you've worked on these projects and similar projects of this scale around the state or around the country. Is this, are we having an atypical experience in Mansfield, or is this level of sort of remediation needed in the midst of a large building project normal? Is this amount of delay relatively normal given the construction environment and that we're in 2022? Or are we in fact experiencing sort of an abnormal level of things done by a contractor that need to be redone in a project, of delay in the construction, of procurement, whatever it might be?
What I think probably the most succinct way to categorize it is the project completion dates that are established in contract and then amended throughout the contract are predicated on the project being delivered to the level of quality as required by the specifications and codes, et cetera. So although we have not yet finalized the potential extensions to the contract dates, the longer the project goes on, it starts to shift from one element of outside externalized forces, COVID and market-wide procurement issues that force the contractor's hand outside of their control, to elements that aren't outside the contractor's control and wouldn't be in alignment with contract documents. No one signs a contract based on expectation that the project's going to be delayed. So any any project that exceeds those contract dates, by definition, would be outside the realm of normal expectations. So to that point, although, like I said, there are outstanding items to be resolved, one of the sort of the viewpoints I shared with the school building committee in terms of expectations is, although we're currently have an August 12th date, there were some external procurement items that were being tracked. For example, this DOAS delay and the generator issue I had mentioned. But for all intents and purposes, those don't impact drywall and painting and flooring and those things of those nature. Yes, you might have to leave out a wall to get in a massive mechanical unit, but otherwise, besides that wall, the mechanical unit and some of its components, the work down the hall, painting some things isn't impacted by that. So as the project proceeds, it starts to shift from just externalizing factors that might be controlled to, I can't tell you why some of the walls aren't painted there, other than the work just hasn't proceeded. And it starts to get towards, without making a judgment, with all the facts being resolved via potential change orders and claims and extenuating circumstances. The further the project continues beyond these externalizing claim issues, the more it becomes important to review whether or not the work is actually delayed due to just the progress of the contractors and the workmanship of the contractors. So again, I don't want to make a final declarative judgment here while there's still potential change orders outstanding and some of those items. As you saw from the walkthrough, there's a lot of portions of the building that aren't done that aren't related to delays in a mechanical unit, drywall, painting, et cetera.
Okay.
I think also there's a potential legal issues here, and it's probably not a particularly good idea to make opinions on quality and process at this time. Period. Ron?
Basically, a somewhat naive question. when a school is completed, when all is said and done, before a certificate of occupancy or whatever the document is called is granted, is there somebody external to all of us, external to you, external to us, that comes and verifies that the school is in proper shape?
Is that a question for myself or Randy?
Whoever.
Wasn't sure. In terms of who inspects the building, there is the architect is required to submit it's called their own substantial completion form. And that's based off of their review and their engineer's review of the various installations in relation to the contract documents. So there's the architectural team, there's the building code official who actually certifies this certificate of substantial completion, along with the fire marshal, town planners, et cetera. There's also special inspectors and materials testing agents that come through and certify that the concrete's the strength it's supposed to be, the welds are in accordance with compliance standards, et cetera. So all of those inspections and reviews are done along the way and aren't released for the next stage of work until the compliance is met from the first part. So an example being, there's a typical process called an above ceiling inspection, where the engineers come through, the building code official comes through and make sure that everything above a ceiling aligns with the contract documents and code before you close up the ceiling. And that continues throughout the project and culminates with the substantial completion process, which outlines, here are all the things that you need in order to occupy the building. We've identified this punch list of items that are incomplete but not critical, or code safety compliant reasons for keeping the building not open. And that process starts from the very start of construction all the way through to final closeout and the final payment of fees.
And just in addition, there is an additional commissioning agent that comes
Yes.
in and reviews mechanicals. Are going to do blower tests, make sure the building's tight as it's supposed to be. And so they are on site as well as an independent.
They're independent of
yes.
us. They're
Yes.
the state.
Yes, we've hired them to double check.
Ms. Berthelot.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, speaking not in a, to suggest that maybe the jobs aren't being done as well as they should be done, but to ensure that all jobs are being done well all the time, is it possible for Colliers to be on site more often to ensure that all of the subcontractors are getting the job done right the first time?
So, I mean, Colliers can provide additional staff out that would be outside our current scope of services. Even with that oversight, there's a difference in a contractual difference between oversight and actual supervision of the trades and who's performing what work, and the people swinging the hammer versus the people reviewing them swinging the hammer versus the people inspecting the work that's done after swinging the hammer. So in terms of monitoring each and every subcontractor in their work in real time to ensure it's compliant, to that level of effort, that's something that's well outside the norm of construction projects. For to have a third party reviewing each and every piece of scope, there's a phenomenal amount of work that goes on. And that's what the town has retained Newfield to do as the general contractor, is to provide that level of oversight. Can additional services and additional testing and additional monitoring be procured to help ensure that level of QA, QC? Yes, that's additional services that TSKP and Colliers can review if the town is so interested in providing. But in terms of who's managing the actual person proverbially swinging the hammer, that, as I mentioned earlier, that's first multiple layers of Newfield and their superintendents and the subcontractors foreman reviewing that line work, and then ultimately the architect and design team coming and certifying that work aligns with what they've designed and what they've put forward. So as I know Randy and the building committee can attest to, there have been additional steps that the committee has procured to help ensure some of the quality assurance and quality control, whether it be additional testing services, as we've done at a number of places throughout the building envelope, given the net zero requirements for the building. But that's just a function of what the town's desire is for having additional oversight and monitoring of the work as it goes on in the building.
Oops. I make sure I understood what you said. So the hired contractor, it's their responsibility to ensure that the subcontractors are doing the work right the first time?
Yes, they are the first line of ensuring that the work that they are providing for the town matches the documents that they base their bid off of.
And is
So
it
it's
your
yes.
sense that they're there actually doing that they're, at this point, that enough mistakes have happened that they are on board with making sure that the project moves forward like it should, and such that they're physically they're making sure that the person who's putting the tile down is doing it right the first time?
Newfield has, both in their leadership meetings that we've had with them, when the delays and some of the quality issues have been brought up, the leadership team has indicated that that's what they're committed to. They have, to Newfield's credit, staffed up in terms of providing additional superintendents and assistant superintendents to help monitor the work. When they started the project, it was a project manager, a project engineer, and one superintendent. I think they're up to 5 or 6 staff now, dependent upon the day, that are in the trailer helping to monitor the work. So there are items that are being caught in real time by Newfield and their staff. That's so it's not to say that there is a complete lack of oversight or anything of that nature. But when something comes in a report, by definition, it's something that slipped through the cracks of QA/QC on the part of Newfield. Sometimes that will occur, and punch lists and deficiencies are a part of any project. That's especially one of this scale and magnitude and uniqueness. So Newfield has taken steps proactively and through their own cost, as it should be, to ensure that the quality is meeting the project, but items are still slipping through the cracks, as evidenced by each item that's still shows up or is new on each of the reports that comes out.
Do you think they're appropriately staffed up at this point?
The levels of staffing that they have are at or greater than what projects of this nature might typically have for field staff and field crews. So it's not necessarily a lack of manpower per se that is, or what could be expected as manpower compared to other projects of a similar size and nature.
Okay,
Mr. Coleman, is there anybody who hasn't spoken before who wishes to speak? Nope. Okay, Mr. Coleman.
okay. I think basically I made my point, and I could go on and on and on all night with all the construction flaws. Okay, so I won't bore you with all the flaws and things that I see that are going on. But I will tell you, the ship is sinking, and no one is at the helm. No one is watching over this project. Our owner agent is failing us, folks, okay? I wish you would all take the time to go through all the past packets and see just what's happening and what we are getting for a school here. It's not what I want. I hope it's not what you want either. Thank you.
I just wish to assure the public that members of the school committee are very much aware of all of the items that are in the packets. It takes about an hour just to get through them before a meeting, and you are not the only one who has been concerned about some of the issues that have been found. Mr. Alaconis, do you have more to present in this? And Mr. Dart, do you have anything to add? I think when the school is completed, we will be really proud of it. It will be gorgeous. It will be special. It will be provide educational opportunities for our children that are not to be found anywhere else in the state. So, construction problems aside, when it is finished, it will be very special.
I just want to ask reassurance. Students who are now in this temporary situation, their education is proceeding. Things are working well enough for them.
I appreciate the question. It's actually what we do. We don't drive buses and we don't build buildings. We teach kids. And so 100% of our focus is on best supporting kids in these alternative locations. It's not ideal. We know that there are growing pains, but in terms of the quality of education, supports and services, our kids are getting the best and would only get the best.
Mr. Shaken and then Mr. Coleman.
Just a request, the photos that were in the presentation today aren't in our packet, and so can they be put in our minutes or in the next packet or in some way? I think it would be good for the public to be able to see them, and obviously school building committee stuff is also public, but people look at council stuff with a little bit more frequency, so that might be helpful. I was impressed by how much better things look on the inside than they look when you drive by on the street, which is my perspective every week. So that would be really helpful. Thanks. And I don't think the ship is sailing. I think we're 85% of the way done on a large and complicated first of its kind building in the state, and we'll get there.
Mr. Coleman.
I'd like to make a motion, if I may.
Go ahead. Mr. Coleman has distributed to us a motion which occupies the entirety of a 8.5 by 11 paper, and I would suggest that the members of the council read it and that Mr. Coleman make his motion in an abbreviated form, if possible.
Okay, let me know when everyone's done reading.
Mayor, I just want to let you know I have shared this motion, the written motion, with the town clerk.
Thank you. Are you ready to make your motion, Mr. Coleman?
I sure am. The top paragraph should cover it. Move effective October 11th, 2022, to dissolve the Mansfield School Building Committee and repopulate the committee during an application process based on qualifications of the applicants. The repopulated committee will have a collective experience in engineering all phases of construction, environmental practices, and experience in daily operations of public school system. Individuals with experience in bid proposals, selection, and construction-related finances will be included in the committee. Applicants will be screened by the Mansfield Town Council Committee on Committees with the help of professionals in the field.
Is there a second to Mr. Coleman's motion?
I will second for the sake of discussion.
Mr. Frattoni seconds. Would you like to speak to your motion, Mr. Coleman? I think we understand your position, so if you could make your speaking to
Yeah,
it
there's
relatively
something I would
brief.
like to make very clear. I respect everybody on our committees, including the school building committee. Don't get me wrong, this isn't really about the school building committee. I just think that we need some more experience on there. I mean, I don't want to insult a lot of people who put a lot of volunteer work, and you know, we appreciate all that. But I don't feel as though the experience that we need is populated within the school building committee. Okay, and I would like to see it with more people from the construction field as well. But I also want to say that I have lost confidence in Colliers, our owner representative, and selected contractors, architectural firm TSKP Studios, and the site construction contractor of Newfield Construction. Thank you.
Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. The formation of the school building committee was debated at length by the council in 2018. It was appointed by the council in 2018. Process of the appointments was discussed by the council in 2018. It passed by a majority of the council in 2018. It's a group of people. Mr. Wallakonis is a volunteer. He's an appointed person on the committee. He's not a school employee or a construction expert. And it's full of people in town who have an interest in the school, in representing the taxpayers on this committee, but not any professional interest in the school besides some construction experience of their own in some cases. So I disagree with Mr. Coleman's assessment of the work that they have done, of the work that Colliers is doing, and of the progress of the school. And so I have some question about whether this motion is germane to our agenda this evening, but it's been made and seconded, and so probably be faster for us to all just vote it down, which I hope you will do.
Does anybody else wish to speak to Mr. Coleman's motion? Ms. Cotton.
I did have one question, Mr. Coleman. I understand that your motion is to disband the current school building committee and to replace them with unidentified professionals in the field that the Committee on Committees would screen and potentially, I guess, put out the bid for. Who would determine who are the professionals in the field? Who would be best to do a needs assessment, if not the people we've already appointed in 2018?
First of all, Peter Dart would be somebody who would have education experience. But we would need, a general contractor, maybe, people in the trades that work it every day and understand what's going on and can recognize it as it comes along, because they do it every day. I don't see that on the school building committee.
Mr. Coleman, that's your second opportunity to speak to your motion. So do you wish to speak? I've just interrupted you because I didn't recognize you to speak, although Ms. Cotton asked for you. I didn't recognize you. So
okay.
This
Yeah.
is your second time.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
I just want to answer Dr. Carlita Cotton's question.
Sure.
Did that answer your question, Doctor?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will comment that the hiring of our expertise, the experts who work for the building committee, was done through a bidding process that was according to town law and state law, with very complex and complete attention paid to qualifications, backgrounds, et cetera. So rather than ask these folks to volunteer for us, we're actually paying them. Anybody else wish to speak to this? All right. Ms. Chain, would you please call the roll on this motion?
Yes, Berthelot,
No.
No.
Bruder, Coleman,
Yes.
Cotton,
No.
Frattoni,
No,
Moran,
No.
No.
Shuren, Shaken.
No.
Thank you.
No surprise.
The motion fails. All right. Is there anything more that the school building committee would like to present to the council on the construction project?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
For point of clarification for the record, you asked Mr. Coleman to be brief, but it's my understanding that this entire multi-part resolution was incorporated in his initial reading of the motion, that we also rejected that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Thank you.
Ms. Berthwatt.
I want to thank everybody who presented tonight for your time. And I have to say, I think the building is beautiful. And like everybody, I'm very anxious to see it finished, but expect that it'll be a wonderful, wonderful place for learning.
Okay, thank you. Then we will move on to the new business, and Mr. Dart gets a chance to address the council on this bus service update. I will remind the council that this is not within our purview, that this is a Board of Ed by law responsibility. The council has no responsibility. This is purely a matter of information only. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Dart here in a moment, but I just want to say, lest I forget to say so at the end of any remarks that that Peter's about to share, I just want to say that, you know, Superintendent Dart, Peter, is basically still brand new to the position. 3.5 months? And so he and I are still getting to know each other, and certainly sort of at the beginning of our professional relationship as town manager and superintendent of Mansfield Public Schools. But I just want to say that this particular issue that we're going to discuss, and the approach that he took, decisive action that he took in the sort of immediate aftermath of the issues that arose, which he'll detail in a minute. We spent the last hour plus talking about themes like quality, accountability, transparency, public safety, leadership, empathy for families, responsiveness to concerns, identifying solutions. The list goes on and on. And obviously one common thread is we're still talking about the school district and a project or issues affecting the school district. But I just want to say on a personal note, and I'll say this as one part town manager, one part father of 2 of our 3 kids that are in Mansfield Public Schools that have been impacted by, the project we just talked about and the delays, but also the school busing issue. Superintendent, I just want to commend you for your decisive leadership on this front. I don't think there's any question in my mind how deeply you personally care about the lives and well-being of the students that you're entrusted with overseeing on a daily basis. So I don't want to embarrass you, but I just want to say, you know, as a parent and as town manager both, how assured I feel every day that you're doing your level best and at every turn. So thank you.
I really appreciate that. And Mayor and council members, I appreciate your interest in hearing from me and about our work, and more importantly, your support is greatly appreciated. It takes a village. School is more than a building. School is more than a bus, but yet we are tasked with overseeing all of that. The second day of school was canceled simply because students weren't safe. It wasn't because of the drivers. It was because we were not prepared with our vendor to be able to communicate routes in a way to support families and students, to know where they're going, what bus they were assigned to. There weren't enough drivers. And so, unfortunately, Mansfield is facing what many districts across the country are faced with. There is a driver shortage. We are still 4 drivers short. We are able to increase the number of buses that are on the road, supporting M&J Bus Company, our vendor, in doing anything it takes to get those buses moving. So the short of it, from that second day of school, when it was about communication, routing information, and a bus company that was just ill-prepared to provide the level of transportation that we were used to and that we expected to receive, has changed greatly. So this week and last week, we are seeing improved ride times. We have more buses on the road. We have communication protocols in place. The Board of Education responded appropriately by activating their transportation committee. We held a meeting on the 29th. We had 11 families represented, or community members who shared their experiences. I was proud of the families because they came with heartbreaking stories of the hardships of inconsistent bus runs and failed services, but they also came with an appreciation for the staff and came with suggestions and helpful pieces of information. The Transportation Committee will meet again tomorrow. We will continue to think of this in several different ways. Number one, how can we use policy to ensure that we never go through this again? So we want to create a structure that is more transparent, that has multiple inputs, that has route information in our hands early in the summer, so it can be vetted by a team of people who know the town well, and we can work with the vendor in time for an opening that supports families. That process largely was just given to the vendor, and for years it worked, but clearly we now know that we cannot rely on the vendor to do that without input from the Board of Education or the Superintendent's office. We've also reorganized our work, so while we've hired a vendor to do this for us, never again will we be in a situation where we don't have staff dedicated, including myself, the Director of Teaching and Learning, Director of Technology. We're looking at all aspects of helping our vendor clean up their data systems, their routing information, and communication practices. So again, we're seeing an improvement. However, we still are 4 drivers short. And so we'll continue to work creatively with M&J to help them hire, attract talent, to retain the talented drivers that are committed and drive each and every day. And I am very hopeful and optimistic that a month from now, we won't be talking about this. We'll be talking more about a potential move-in date of an elementary school. But I do want to thank you for your attention and time to share this. It is not lost on me, the hardships that the busing situation caused on our families and our students. And I appreciate Ryan's comments, because my job is to ensure from bell to bell that our kids are getting the very best education, and that starts before the bell. It doesn't end with the bell. It begins with the transportation systems that support that. So as a new incoming superintendent, lessons learned, not to trust past practices and good relationships, to have safeguards in place that continue to keep our vendor accountable, which includes reaching out for legal counsel, which includes looking at options that we have. We're in year 2 of a 5-year contract. And so the reality is we know that we need to continue to build and strengthen our partnership with M&J right now to help them deliver the service that we know that they're capable of doing.
Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions. Thanks for coming tonight. And, this is not something that we have any control over as a council. So thanks to the Board of Ed for letting you sit on the hot seat with us tonight. They didn't have to. And we ought to all be respectful of the fact that it's their job to hold you accountable and hold the bus company accountable. And the only thing that we really could do is decide we wanted to give you some extra money to try to figure this out if you needed it. But it sounds like you're figuring it out without that. With that, I have a couple questions. The first one is, I understand we're in the middle of a school year and in the beginning of a long contract. This company's worked with us since I was a kid. Not long before that, we haven't operated our own buses in several decades. Has the board thought about bringing things back in-house? As question A, and then, because there are some towns who do that. I think Brooklyn still runs their own buses. And then question B is there a short-term possibility of hiring EastCon to run a couple buses if they have excess capacity or ability, or one of the other sort of competitors to M&J? I know M&J has some other contracts besides Mansfield, but they're a smaller operation than the EastCon or some of the other First Student, some of the other bus companies in the state, in the area.
So yes, there have been many conversations around different suggestions. One, revisiting the idea of owning and operating our own buses, creating a cooperative with regionalized districts that are in the same boat. and also to look at other vendors. Other vendors are in the exact same situation where there's a driver shortage. So EastCon and other vendors aren't in a position to offer any additional services because they're trying to meet the contracts that they currently run. And I think that we would find that even if we operated in our own garage. Ashford is another smaller district that operates their buses. And, it means taking on an infrastructure that we would have to think seriously about. I was not in the district when we opted to go with a vendor, but I will tell you the benefits of having a vendor, that they're far more competitive in terms of leasing and procuring their buses, maintaining and providing services. Given the success that we've had with M&J in the past and that other districts have had, I truly believe that this particular situation not only was compounded by the driver shortage, they also had a transition in their garage dispatch manager. Susan moved to Maine. She was just a beloved person who had a lot of institutional knowledge. It is hard to replace a person like that who can dispatch, route, and drive a bus all at the same time and knows our community. So they've hired a great person, but it's going to take some time for that person to catch up to speed. But to answer your question, we were looking at all of those options.
Thanks. And then my second question is, so I live, about as far from Goodwin, where our 6-year-old is right now as a second grader, as someone who lives, on the north side of town near Goodwin will be from the new elementary school. And even if things were on time, he's still getting home pretty late. One of the things that was talked about when we were contemplating putting a school at the southeast site was a transportation plan that allowed for basically more drivers, right?
Yeah.
Many more smaller vehicles to take a couple kids quickly from Goodwin from the new site of the elementary school to, for example, Goodwin, to a place on the far side of town. And just the fact that there were only a couple kids on that bus with a very short route would mean that their delivery times wouldn't be any longer than people were experiencing with the 3 schools, or not much longer. What's the deal with that plan?
Yeah,
and
I
is
am
it
aware of
still
that.
achievable? Is it something that we're thinking about for next semester, next year, whenever we're in that position? Or are we going to sort of flip things over and do this maybe in a more organized way, but all over again when the new school opens?
Yeah. So we've contracted for 17 buses and several smaller van transports. That is in the plan. However, we need drivers to have that actually happen. So as soon as we have 4 new drivers and we have some people in the pipeline and we have some creative ideas how to support and expedite that, once we see those drivers in place, owning the routes, we'll be able to further explore and make sure that we're in a good position. We're right now starting to look at the routing information that we currently have and apply that to the new elementary school, which includes looking at a special shuttle run for some neighborhoods that we know would benefit from that. We see that even right now, that we would benefit from that. Whether we can do that right now or not, it really is dependent on the drivers.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Dart? Mr. Coleman?
Just a comment. Let's do an RFP next time when we go look at our vendors. I know that, we learn from past mistakes, and I think that was a big one. Also, have an attorney rewrite that contract for us. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, well, good luck.
Thank you.
Best wishes with a rapid opening of a wonderful new school, to
Yes.
which the kids all get in under 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. Same here. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, the next item on our agenda is a proclamation recognizing Quentin Kessel. Mr. Aylesworth, I know that there are some folks here from Planning and Zoning and from the Conservation Commission who wish to speak to this, so would you open the discussion?
I'd be happy to, Mayor. I believe I'm turning it over to the chairperson of the Conservation Commission, Michael Soers, who will do the honors.
Welcome, Michael Soers.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council members. Good evening, Mr. Manager. My name is Michael Soers. I'm the chair of the Mansfield Conservation Commission. I live at 99 Dog Lane. This is really a bittersweet moment. We've had Quentin Kessel volunteering for our community in service to conservation of natural resources, preservation of open space, and just a general, I've been listening to this earlier conversation, has also served as a way of reviewing projects and providing advice to planning and zoning and the Inland Wetland Agency for 50 years. He started on the Conservation Commission in 1972 when the Connecticut Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Act was first enacted. And he has decided at this time to step down from his volunteer service on the Conservation Commission, as well as on the Parks and Natural Resources Committee, which he has served as a liaison for many years for our commission. And so this, for 50 years, it seems like a small gesture to have the town provide this proclamation in recognition of all of his service. And I'll just say quickly on a personal note, I was invited to join the Conservation Commission about 8 years ago by Quentin. I have really benefited from his leadership, from his active participation on the commission and other endeavors that we're also working on, and other liaisons that we are a liaison also to some other committees. And he is somebody that not only is volunteering in this capacity, but also, very much believes in his heart in conservation and stewardship. He's very active also with Joshua's Trust. And I've just been very fortunate as a community member to get to work with him and learn from him over the past several years that I've been on the committee. And then was fortunate to become chair when he decided to step down as chair. And I just would like us all to take a moment either now or later just to think about anybody in our community that puts 50 active years in a voluntary service to the community. I think is just, it's just absolutely astounding. And I'm not sure I can live up to that sort of bar, but it certainly sets an example for the kinds of effort and growth that we can all provide to our communities. I know Jennifer Kaufman is also here. She's worked with Quentin for many years. So I don't know, Jennifer, if you wanted to add anything to what I had said.
No, Michael, thank you. You did a great job, and you really kind of encapsulated what Quentin has given to our community, to the commission. And I definitely have worked with Quentin for many, many years. And I too just echo all of your sentiments. So thanks.
There
You're
is
welcome.
another side to this. Quentin Kessel has been a real nuisance for anybody who wanted to get something through without paying adequate attention to the conservation and preservation aspects of their decision. So I think that's the quality of a really fine volunteer, that you can push when you need to push, regardless of how annoyed people get by the push. But when you're absolutely right, you may leave a lasting mark on the community. So I'm more than happy to vote for this thing. But I think that he's been a gadfly and a thorn, as well as just a plain old wonderful person, which he also is, of course. So is there somebody who would move adoption of this proclamation? Mr. Shuren?
11,
You can't be heard.
Sorry. Move October 11th, 2022 to authorize the mayor to issue the proposed proclamation in recognition of Dr. Quentin Kessel.
Is there,
Do you need it read or sufficient?
we'll need a second. I see Mr. Bruder has seconded. I think we have heard everything that's in the proclamation from the people who have spoken already, so we don't need to actually read it. Did anybody wish to add any further comments? Do you wish to speak to your motion, Mr. Shuren?
No, but I've known Dr. Kessel since I first came to Yukon 25 years ago, and the same dedication that he's visited in the town, he did as a member of the university community as well.
Are we ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor of issuing the proclamation honoring Quentin Kessel, please raise your hand, and it is unanimous. Thank you, one and all. And congratulations to Dr. Kessel, and best wishes for a retirement of what sounds like an almost full retirement from volunteer service, although I suspect he isn't leaving Joshua's Trust all that soon. Mr. Shaken.
Thanks, Mayor. I move that we delay item 9C, which is the next item on our agenda, the update from the Human Services Department, to take place after 9D.
And 9E.
And 9E?
Yes.
Sure. To take place at the end of new business.
Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Shaken and seconded by Mr. Bruder. Do you wish to speak briefly to your motion?
Only that there are people here on Zoom, members of our Human Services Advisory Commission, who are volunteers and who want to speak to 9D at least. So let's let them go first, and then we'll get our update from Pat and staff at the end.
All right.
Gotta vote.
All those in favor of changing the agenda, please raise your hand. All those who are present have voted in favor. So we have changed the agenda. So the next item is the ARPA funding for social service agencies. Mr. Aylesworth and Ms. Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. Council will recall that going back to last winter or spring when the initial funding proposals and recommendations relative to the American Rescue Plan were presented to the council, you all, in sort of a flurry of motions, I guess, one of the buckets of funding that you all approved were a number of items that were conditionally approved pending an implementation plan, as it were. And so one of the items that you conditionally approved was $350,000 in one-time funding support for area social service agencies. The Human Services Advisory Committee came back to or had an audience with the town council, I believe in June, early June, I think it was. And at that meeting, we talked about some proposed adjustments to the quote-unquote regular annual appropriation process when the town council deliberates on programming to be funded for social service agencies. And at the conclusion of that discussion, you'll all recall that it was also decided that the Human Services Advisory Committee would come back to the council at a future date with a proposed process and approach and basically a game plan for how the one-time rescue plan funded funds for area social service agencies would be tackled. And so the Human Services Advisory Committee has been meeting, and they do have a proposal to present to the council tonight. And without any further ado, I will turn it over to Pat Schneider to introduce this further.
Yes, I'm here just as some support, but really it's been the work of the Human Service Advisory Council that's reviewing, and we have 3 members here. Meme, who you all know from the Board of in her role here with our school system. She's been a wonderful support. Excuse me, a lot of times when I'm here, my voice kind of goes in and out. But anyway, I will turn it over to them because I think that they put the majority of the work into this and have come up with a really good plan to get this RFP out for the proposals, which I think you all have in your packet. So I'll turn it over to them.
Who should begin? We have three folks here: Ethel Manzares, Julia Delap, and Shamim Patwa. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. You have in your package our forms and also a summary of how we're going to approach the granting of the grants and et cetera. And so we hope to have the grants come in and by mid-December, January, so that we can start ruling on them. And if you have any questions, just let us know. I think the package is self-explanatory.
I have one question, and the question is, the forms are pretty complex and they ask for an awful lot of information. Is it going to be overwhelming for a small nonprofit to do this kind of work in order to apply for these grants?
I can speak to that. And this actually is the common application for social service grants. And we actually simplified it. So, and we have in the past offered some technical assistance if that was required. You know, I think that we're kind of probably asking for the bare minimum. And most agencies are going to know how to do this because it's a pretty common process.
Thank you.
You know, I wanted to add in that if you remember the last time we were all in front of the town council, we needed more of a system and a tighter rubric for how we were giving the money away. It's quite a bit of money. And this was an attempt to get more guidance for our team. We looked at really some key priorities too. And I think, I hope you find that this is a little more clearer and we'll be able to stand by kind of where we've put the money in a more logical way. Julia, do you want to add to that?
I think what I would just say is that the first page of this application looks fairly extensive, but it should all be able to be answered in one page. And all of that is pretty set. Most nonprofits would have sort of a template that they would use for this kind of grant application. So the meat of their application would really be the second page where we ask for a narrative, which is 5 pages, which is relatively small given what agencies are used to applying for. And then of course, there's the financial piece.
Ms. Berthelot.
I'm so super excited about this. Yay. Thank you for doing this work. A couple of things, if you don't mind. The first is in the write-up, it says that to be eligible, folks must be 501c3, but in the actual application, it appears that you could be a 501c3 or not.
You have to have the backing of a 501c3. There are some small agencies who, correct me if I'm wrong, Shameen and Julie, who don't have a 501c3, but they get it from the bigger agency that is their fiduciary.
So what we, and actually, you know, fortunately, we had a member who from WAME, Victoria, many of you already know, who said that WAME sometimes, for some of the very small organizations, and she gave the example of the Quiet Corner Refugee Organization, it's all volunteers. They don't have their own 501c3. But if they wanted to apply for a program, WAME already does this for them and acts as the fiduciary for that. So in other words, they will provide all of the documentation and everything so that it would still be a 501c3 that was accepting it for some of the small programs. And this is not uncommon for small, you know, all volunteer organizations. It's can be quite a challenge to get that 501c. If anyone's ever gone through the process. So there are some cases where they fall under an umbrella organization that provides that for them.
So I'm not so sure that the application captures that.
Okay.
That that's a possibility or how that would work. so it would, in fact, it wouldn't be, it would be WAME that would be applying, but then it should just be clear that WAME is applying. They're the 5013, they're the, I mean, this might be something that they'll put the money out to somebody else, but it appears that the money would be going directly to the organization that doesn't have the not-for-profit tax designation. So I think the language needs to be clearer there.
Right. I think the challenge with wording it that way will be that it would mean that if WAME chose to do that, they may not be able to apply for a project that WAME has specific.
I don't see why they couldn't get two for two
Okay.
different projects.
Right.
I mean, there doesn't say you could only have one project. The worry about having money appearing to go to something that's not a 5013 is they don't have a board. There's no oversight. Giving money to somebody who's not clearly a not-for-profit. So I think it's got to be clear that the money's going to the not-for-profit, and then that money may go out to another organization, and that they are responsible for making sure that money's being spent
Right.
the way it's supposed to be.
And again, WAME acts as their fiduciary at this point, so they already have that established
So I
relationship.
think it needs to be clear that
Okay.
this only goes to 5013s.
Yep.
The other question I have, I'm curious, I think the categories are great. I'm wondering, given the very well-documented problems in early childhood education / childcare, that not-for-profit childcare organizations are included.
They actually can apply. I think one
But
of the
it's-
challenges, and I hate to kind of speak to this a little too much, might know a little bit more about this. There has been quite a bit of funding that's available to childcare through a number of streams. This would not negate them from applying for this.
It says you have to be one of these following areas, and it's not listed. It says mental health and wellness, food insecurity, homelessness / housing insecurity, economic insecurity, transportation and access.
Right, and childcare would fit under economic insecurity?
Yes. I think if it's going to be more expensive, then economic insecurity needs to be defined in such a way that captures that.
Mhm.
I would not have thought that an organization that was providing,
Right, or it could be actually, depending on, it could be health and wellness, depending on if they were doing a capital expense. But
I
you would
don't-
you would like it to include
I wouldn't,
child.
if I were an organization and I looked at this list and I was running a
Mhm.
not-for-profit childcare, I wouldn't think I was
Right.
eligible.
I can say that again, they have had more access to applications for funding than some of the other nonprofits.
I mean, I'm sure you could give me an argument. I mean, I hear you're saying
Yeah, I'm
two
not-
things. So,
Mhm.
I mean, either they're not going to be eligible. My question is, are they going to be eligible? And if not, why? I
Right.
mean, the committee can make their own decision.
Right.
I was surprised that they're not on the list.
Right, we actually went back to the ARPA, with the ARPA information that went out, the priorities that they had listed. So that's where those came from. So, but it certainly can be, because the town
mean,
can
again,
choose to put that on.
The slow of women returning to the work, the slow return of women to the workforce has been blamed on lack of childcare. So it seems like an important area. And the other thing, and then I'll stop, under the Human Services Advisory Committee is recommending the following. Grants will be in the amounts of $5,000 to $25,000, depending on the merit of the request. I find that language confusing. It sounds as if, depending on sort of the quality of what they're asking for, there'll be a determination, where in the application it just says you ask for a certain amount of money. Is it going to be you ask for a certain amount of money and that's what you'll get? Or is the Human Service Organization going to determine how much the fund organization's at?
Would anybody on the,
My understanding was that the Human Services Advisory Committee would be determining the fund level.
Right.
But we were looking for a range and not to exclude the smaller grant people or the higher grant people. I mean, I think your comments are very helpful, Terry. And back to the other question of priorities, we were looking at priorities as being something that will change each cycle. So, one of the things I think in my lens and many people here was that mental health was a big one. And so that was, maybe in a few years that won't be. So I don't know if that answers your question on why maybe we highlighted certain ones over others.
This might be something that you could clarify in an explanation so that you would have that list of criteria, but you could say, for example, if a daycare center wanted to do a project that had to do with the mental health of the children and parents, that would be acceptable, even though that organization is not on the list. It's the nature of the project that you're funding. And the same language comment on the level of funding. It should be on the nature of the program, not on the quality of the application. I mean, you want to fund a program, but you don't want to say, you asked for 25,000, we're only going to give you 10 because we didn't like the way you wrote your narrative. I mean, if the program they're going to ask for will fail with $10,000, you want to give them what is necessary to make the program work. So the funding level should be based on the project and whether you're willing to fund the project, not whether or not you like the application.
Quality of the application, because they should be explaining things like, is it sustainable? How many people are they going to serve? So there are some things that actually do, the
Yes, of
application
course.
is evaluated on its own merit as an application as well.
Well, I think it's the project that's being evaluated.
project,
And
yes,
how it's,
not-
Right.
and I guess the language should indicate also that the range of, I think what is expected is the range of awards will be between $5,000 and $25,000. And depending on the project, and taking into account the amount, in the application, they ask for a certain amount of money, so whatever the ask is, right? Maybe you'll give them more, maybe you'll give them less. But it's the $5,000 to $25,000 is just the range, to give them a
Yes,
sense of what to ask
that's
for.
Right.
To
And
m-
that is actually one of the comments for our agency grants that we do on an annual basis here. It's been one of the confusing things for people who are putting an application, not knowing what the range is or what they can ask
So
for.
maybe it just needs to say that the grants will, the amounts will be in the range of $5,000 to $25,000, depending on the nature of the project.
Okay.
Mr. Shakin.
Thanks. I have just sort of a question. It seems to me, the way that this is presented at least, that we are getting a recommendation from the Human Services Advisory Committee to focus at least this round of applications on these 5 issue areas, and that they have considered and decided to exclude other areas like childcare. And it would be up to us if we decided to disagree and add or removed or whatever, and that's what we would, our decision is what we would end up doing. So that unless I'm missing something and there was an intention for childcare programs to be included, I will say I think these categories generally match what we as a council discussed in terms of the use of these dollars when we were sort of considering them for ARPA. But Councilor Berthelot is correct. There's significant childcare issues, and we have some nonprofit childcare centers in town that would be eligible for grant funding from all sorts of places, including the town, if they want to apply for it. So I don't have an opinion on that. I'll just leave that up to the council. I think if we wanted to do that, we would need to at least adjust the committee's recommendation. I have a couple of questions though. One is on the grant amount size. At the high limit of that, we would need 14 applicants in order to exhaust the dollars. Seems like a lot. And on the low side, 70, right? Whatever 5,000 divided by 350 is. I think it's 70. That's a lot. Many more than I think we've ever gotten before in terms of number of organizations. Does that seem like a too small of an amount, or is the idea that this would be round one and that then we would reassess and we've got 4 more years to spend this money, and so we might as well space it out and make these funds available for several years? Like on the business relief fund that we did, we were mildly surprised that it wasn't all taken up in the initial round and had to sort of redo things and hope it gets taken up in the next round. Is your idea as a committee to design this to last for multiple years rather than expect to expend $350,000 in one fell swoop?
I think, well, again, I think the committee to speak to it, but I think the clarity of this application and the amounts we're offering may get more applicants for this than we have in the past for our regular. But I think that was the thought, that if the amount wasn't fully spent, that there would be an opportunity because of the way the ARPA funds work to do a second round.
Okay. And then my second question that's helpful is, sorry, committee, do you have a?
Well, I was just going to say that if we had 14 agencies apply and they each applied for the maximum amount, that would take up the entire $350,000. And for this past year's small grants to local nonprofits, I believe we had 11 or 12 nonprofits apply. I don't have the number off the top of my head right in front of me, but it was very close to that. So I think it is certainly possible that we could max out all of the funding in the first round. Some of that will depend on getting the word out. But also letting people know that they can apply for up to $25,000, where in the past, some of them just thought they could only apply for what they'd applied for in the previous year. And I think that may, as Pat said, inspire more people to apply.
Okay, then my second question, thanks, is on like compliance and reporting. This may be a broader ARPA question than just these grants, but what are we required to send to the Treasury? And are we, but when we make these grants, both to nonprofits and to businesses, I suppose, are we sort of requiring that they are, at the end of the day, on the hook for the dollars if we're ever audited by the Treasury, if they're ever audited, that they are using the funds the way that the U.S. Treasury says that ARPA funds must be used? Things just keep tightening down more and more on these dollars than what we initially thought they'd be when the American Rescue Plan Act was passed a few years ago. I'm just curious.
I do think that that's one of the reasons why the priorities were worded the way that they were, because that language, I believe, came out of the where they talked about grants being available to social service agencies. You know, we chose that wording to help with that, but Ryan, I'm not sure what you guys
so
are doing as
what I
far
want to
as
say in response to that question, which I think is a very relevant question, is that so this these materials, you know, basically were added to the packet without a tremendous amount of lead time for this meeting. So one of the reasons why the proposed motion on the second page of the agenda item summary is crafted the way that it is it still needs to go through legal counsel review. So we consulted with Attorney Deneen when we rolled out the local business assistance or local business relief funding applications as well. And so we asked him to review for concurrence, both in terms of the backup documentation we were asking entities to provide, but then also making sure that there was I forget the right term here, but basically there was a statement, a disclaimer that was provided that basically said, you know, if you enter into an agreement with the town, our understanding is that, you know, you're making accurate representation of how you'll use the funds in your application. It was like a whole page basically of disclaimer that by signing and agreeing to it, in our town attorney's legal opinion, you know, that doesn't mean that, you know, we just kind of don't care anymore, but essentially, there's a recognition to your point, Mr. Shaken, that, you know, there is a good faith aspect to this, that if funds are requested for a purpose that's entirely legitimate, that the entity receiving those funds will take it upon themselves to make sure that the funds are used in that manner. So we do ask them to sign a statement, basically an oath, that that's what they're going to do, but language analogous to what was included with the local assistance, local business assistance fund will ultimately need to be incorporated into this. We just haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's why the motion is to approve this sort of in its general form, so the substance, the intent is locked, if you will, and some of the more finer details that our town attorney would provide, we would craft and adopt accordingly.
Is there a post-grant reporting requirement in this so that people report back what they actually spent the money on?
There is sort of a, I'm not sure, and if I recall from our conversation with the town attorney Deneen before, I don't know that there's an explicit requirement like articulated in the guidelines. I think that what towns are doing is viewing this as a best practice, and within the realm of reason. Again, it's not about we require you that you check in on a weekly basis and give us a status update, but some sort of reasonable summary documenting how the funds were used with the outcomes and that sort of thing. That is part of the expectation, but there's not as I understand it, and I'd have to defer to the town attorney on this, I don't believe that there's a specific cookbook, if you will, in terms of what that reporting looks like, and it's not necessarily 100% clear what the town as the awarding entity will be required to give the IRS down the road.
And I don't recall, I read this very quickly. Is there included in this application form a requirement for a post-report?
I don't know. I think we were going to cover it in a cover letter, asking that they report at the end of what they did with the money. Am I right, Julian? Or Shami? That was part of our discussion.
Can you give me the question again?
Is there a requirement in the application or in the process that at the end of the year, the grantee reports back on actually how the money was spent?
My memory of that discussion was that we would expect a short report at the conclusion, but it was not, it wasn't something that we included in the application. It was, the expectation was we would reach out to them and, but Pat, you'll have to jump in.
We discussed it, we did discuss it back and forth. From what I can see, it's not required in the ARPA process that happens. And it's not what it's not what we currently do with our agency grants in the town. But we had thought that we could ask that when the person, in order to receive the money, that they do a short summary that we could then bring back to the council or share with the public about what was done with the funds, because I think that would be the best practice to be able to, from a transparency point of view, and actually we use these in our community, and this is what was done with them.
Yes, the thrust of my question was, I see ARPA sort of mentioned in the application. To what extent does the organization support ARPA priorities? Are we as a town being required to send something to the United States Treasury that says we used this dollar for this specific priority through this human services agency who gave us this document saying they were going to use this dollar this way? Or are we just reporting, we gave out $350,000 worth of grants to area nonprofit organizations, and that in and of itself is an allowable ARPA use, and we're not really on the hook beyond that the money is then really being used in these exact purposes? Because I think they're different things. If we're being asked by Treasury to track every dollar, that's different than if we're being asked what buckets did you put the money in, basically.
So my understanding, and I'm happy to seek confirmation from both our finance department as well as town attorney, but my understanding is that as part of the typical reporting that we would provide, we, the town, would provide Treasury, it'll be more of what you described in terms of like that aggregate roll-up. You know, we dispersed X amount of dollars for these agencies or to agencies. However, that doesn't mean that we couldn't be audited some future date, and we would need to obviously retain any and all corresponding backup documentation to show specifically what agencies, for what purposes, and what dollar amounts. So I don't think, I think honestly, this is sort of evolving, and we haven't really been at this as a country very long to know exactly what might be asked. There probably hasn't been, I think the audit protocol, so to speak, is still kind of being determined by the state and federal agencies involved. So we're going to preserve any and all corresponding documentation, but I think as far as what we expect to have to report on, it would be more of that executive summary level than specific granular level. Agency X got this for these, 15 purposes application, so to speak.
It seems to me that if there's an application, you can always justify what you sent the money out for. The question that it seems to me that somebody who is looking for fraud would look for is this a legitimate agency? Did they actually spend this money on this purpose? Which is why I'm asking the question about a final report.
And I'm saying, right, I think we're saying that as a best practice, and we'll work with finance, the town attorney, to craft exactly how it is we should be asking for this, that it is our intent to provide, request not an overly burdensome final report, but appropriate level of detail.
Ms. Berthelot, followed by Mr. Coleman.
Again, thank you all for doing this immensely. And I want to say that I very much like that you've created the grid for evaluating criteria. I think that's super, super helpful.
Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, just one comment. The Mansfield Downtown Partnership Business Relief Fund is seeking nonprofits, correct? I just would be concerned that, I know it's apples and oranges, but I'd be concerned that there would be overlap in that. If you apply for one, you should not be able to apply for the other.
I'll just speak to this briefly because this was discussed. I don't know if this was discussed in the HSAC meeting, but I can say this was discussed or part of conversations I was a part of. And so the thought process here is that while you're right that there could be agencies, nonprofits that would apply for funding under both programs, that the intent in terms of what you're trying to fund is fundamentally different between the two. And so receiving funding under one stream should not preclude you from receiving funding under the other. So the local business relief fund program that has now been expanded to include nonprofits is really intended to help organizations, for-profit or nonprofit in this case, that have experienced some documentable harm as a result of the pandemic get closer to being whole. This money we're talking about here tonight is not really about, making an entity whole that was wounded by the pandemic. It's to actually help them expand their service, their reach, provide more service and quality outcomes for our residents. So definitely understand the nature of the question, but I would just say that I think that it wouldn't be problematic if an entity applied for funding under both and actually received funding under both.
Well, the application does want to look at the balance sheet of the nonprofit, and I think that's a good thing. I'd just be afraid if somebody wanted to bump up their balance sheet in order to get the other grant. I think you ought to have a pretty solid balance sheet. That's the whole idea of the application, correct?
Yeah, I think I would just say, when you consider the timeline, the 990 forms and other backup documentation that a nonprofit would be providing would be retroactive, looking back several years. So any award they might get, 3 weeks from now from one pot of money that the town administers would not, really on a real-time manner, like roll into their next application. There's a time gap there.
Also, just to let you know, most of the nonprofits that serve Mansfield residents are regional nonprofits, which I think they're not necessarily located in Mansfield. So there's not maybe as much overlay of this as you might think.
I would like to remind the council it's now 9:45. There is a motion on this item on page 36. Would somebody like to make this motion? Mr. Bruder?
Move effective October 11th, 2022, to authorize town staff to issue a request for proposals, an RFP, relative to funding support for social service agencies in a manner generally conforming to the spirit and intent of the draft RFP as presented, all funding to be provided from the town's ARPA allocation.
Is there a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds,
And just to speak to my motion, Mayor, if you don't mind.
please.
I just hope that, given all the work that's been going in, in this, not only with the application, but with the committee and certainly with you as the director, I fully support this and hope that we can as well, because it seems very well thought out, and we still, as a council, have final say with certain, with these things, but I think that we should move forward with getting the proposals. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. We are unanimous. Oh, Mr. Shaken abstains, recuses himself. Mr. Shaken
I'm
recuses.
abstaining.
You're abstaining. All right. Motion has been adopted. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the committee for its work.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
now I'm going to be brusque and brief. The next item on our agenda is the vehicle. Ms. Schneider.
Yes, I think the council had, in thought, approved it, but wanted more information. And so I did come forward on the summary lists. It became much more apparent actually this past summer for a number of reasons why we need this vehicle. Specifically for the youth service positive youth development programs. We really had some issue with transportation this past year and had waiting lists that we were not able to serve. As well as we have an older backup van that for Dial-A-Ride, and for our transportation program. And, that became an issue again this summer, particularly with the stealing of the Cadillac converters. It's getting harder to get replacement parts for that vehicle, which is 10 years old. So, and that means that when our newer van goes down, we have no backup vehicle. So all the transportation has to be canceled. So
We have a motion on page 42. Ms. Cotton?
I just had a quick question. I was looking at your requirements for the vehicle and I got a little confused. I noted that you needed it for the ability to carry a large amount of food stuff, vegetables and stuff like that. In my mind, that looks like a cargo van. And then you're saying you also might use it to transport youth around, which would mean you would need seats. So that
Yes.
kind of threw me off. Can you help me out there?
Basically, and we already do it with the vehicle, the one vehicle that we have already. We have such varying needs in the department, and food insecurity has become a huge issue, and we have, and as well as transportation here in town. So we do end up doing some deliveries. So yes, this will be a multi-purpose vehicle. But we need to have the seating so that we can use it to transport as well. So,
Does that mean the seats come out?
they can, yes, some of them can make more cargo space. Or you can fit things around the seats, so.
Okay. There is a motion on page 41. Does somebody wish to make the motion? Mr. Bruder? It's on page 42, I'm sorry.
2 for 2. Move effective October 11th, 2022, to authorize town staff to proceed with the purchase of a new van for the Department of Human Services to use as a method of transporting clients / program participants of all ages, as well as a way to bring programs and services to residents. All funding to be provided from the town's ARPA allocation.
Do we have a second? Mr. Coleman seconds. Speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope that my colleagues can support this. Obviously, a lot of thought has gone into it. This is a great use of our ARPA funding. You know, I might have a little bit more hesitation if it was, you know, town funding, but given the fact that it's not just going to be used for one thing, but also for, you know, helping to address food insecurity in town and also youth services, I think this is a great way to focus our attention, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak to this motion? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of this motion to purchase a van, please raise your hand. All right, we are unanimous. You got your van.
Thanks. I will say, it looks like we may have more bus drivers, people who can drive van in our department than some other towns have. These, talk about having flexible staff.
Do they have commercial driver's
They have
license?
a public service license, 7 people with public service in my
Uh-huh.
department. Because they transport clients, they.
Don't tell the school board that. Well, thank you. Now, it is 5 minutes of 10, and the
I
next.
can go through this really quick. I do want to say that the reason that I was put on the agenda for this, as most of you know, I'm leaving at the end of the year, and they were hoping that this update I could do this so the new person coming on and could have some time. So I will be very brief, and certainly I hope you feel you can ask any questions.
All right, I'm glad you're doing this tonight also because I will be missing the next council meeting. Mr. Shaken will be presiding, so.
Better watch out, everybody.
Okay, Ryan, so I hit the arrow? Yeah. Okay, this is our statement for the whole department. I just want to say we're all about promoting independence, personal enrichment, and enhanced quality of life for Mansfield residents of all ages. That's our goal for all of our programs. You know, inclusivity is huge for us. And we truly feel that, you know, it does take a village to raise people of all ages. Okay, now which arrow do I? Okay, here is our organizational chart. And the positions in red are our open positions. Like everybody, we've had some growth pains, and we're one of the departments that probably has had more growth pains than others. So we currently have a number of recruitments going on. This has caused us to have to curtail or make some decisions almost on a daily basis about who's doing what. And thank goodness I have a very flexible staff who are willing to, you know, go in the kitchen and get the Meals on Wheels out if that's what it's required, regardless of what their role is. You know, they're all about getting things done that have to be done. So we're hoping that we can recruit some good replacements, particularly for our youth service social workers and our nutrition coordinator who retired after 17 years, Sharon. So those are some positions we're really missing. Okay. Human Service Administration, that's what I do. And I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with it. It's about budget and people, facilities and capital, grant management, and fund development. And as most department heads here in the town, I have a number of different other hats that I've been appointed to, like the municipal agent for the elderly, the fair housing officer, the veterans liaison, and I'm also Mansfield's refugee liaison in town. So, these are a bunch of things that we coordinate that we have been talking about. We do a lot of fund development, a lot of grant management in the department. And I don't know if you have any questions about any of the programs that are up there, but if you do, you can either ask now or I am happy to fill you in. We're in the middle of our holiday time time of year, so there's a lot of fund development and planning going on around that right now. So, and we have 4 commissions and committees, very active and involved group of volunteers that are wonderful to work with. As you saw with the Human Service Advisory, you know, they're willing to dig right in and work pretty hard on the as things come up. Social services, again, this is a position that recently turned over. Kathy Ann Easley, who had been here for a very long time, took another position. And we were fortunate that Sarah Dufresne, who's one of our multi-purpose people in our department and has been in a number of positions and also filled in some of our, took the position, and she's been doing a wonderful job. But, you know, that area of our service really seeks and serves Mansfield individuals and families who are financially and vulnerable and at risk by offering a lot of different programs. So very, very busy office. And again, here are a number of the different things that we do through social services in town. And a newer one is the RARE program, which is through ARPA. That's been pretty active, and we've been helping a lot of people who are in arrearage in rent, mortgages, and utilities through that program. So that's been a wonderful addition. It also has helped us access some people that we can help with other things that come in for that program, and we can set them up with other things. So, and then the Mansfield Senior Center, I'm going to go through this quickly because I think most of you have, I know we've presented here before. We have enrichment programs and community education programs. We have social and recreational activities, all the fun stuff, as they've said. We have a number of fitness classes. The newest one we've started is kickboxing, and we have someone in her 90s that is doing kickboxing and absolutely loves it as an exercise form. So, you know, that's a very popular part of our programs as well. Nutrition, we're hoping with, you know, getting a good recruitment for both our nutrition coordinator and a food service assistant, that we can get our cafe back up and running again as well. People have really been clamoring for that. So, and our transportation program. I think you know we try to help out in areas that our regional dial ride program is really not, and our public transportation program is really not able to help out in. This includes out-of-district medical transportation, a volunteer transportation program, as well as a part-time paid driver that does medical transport, some shopping trips, and then some trips as well that are affordable because we don't have to charge for transportation, and open to people, you know, throughout town. And those are very popular and fill up really quickly. And again, outreach and essential services. We offer, this is a picture during the pandemic when staff were going and doing porch visits to people who were, you know, who were shut in that we were concerned about. But we have a number of different things that we do for people who can't walk into the senior center or have a harder time. You know, been very fortunate to have a great outreach and transportation coordinator, Jamel, who's really beefed up a lot of our programming for homebound people and people who have more challenges coming in. Health and wellness services, we have a number of those going on. And we have one of 2 of the only self-support library branches in the state. So the Maple Road Library, which is a cooperative program between the senior center and the town's library. And again, a number of volunteers that do so many different things that we wouldn't be able to do if we didn't have such a large volunteer group. And youth services. We have a number of programs going on. This is one of our mentoring programs in the elementary school. We typically have about 100 elementary school kids who are matched up with mentors from UConn who volunteer. It's been a little bit of a challenge this year with the school situation, but they've been able to work it out. So we have 2 sets of volunteers going into both of the elementary schools right now. And then we also have our Leadership Engagement Adventure Program. This is one of our summer programs that we use adventure-based learning. And Big Friends, this is our mentoring program for our middle school age kids. And we've actually been able to do this very effectively by having it be part of the after-school programming available at the middle school, which helps with transportation and some other things. But again, wonderful opportunity to partner with UConn. Mansfield Youth Pride, My Pride program. This is our middle school age LGBTQIA plus youth celebration group. Very active group, and we're very involved in our Pride celebration that we had this year in town. Mansfield Mustangs, that's our service learning program. This is the one that we constantly have a waiting list for. These kids just love to get together and do service projects over the summer, and they do all kinds of different ones. So this has been, a great program that we've had for a number of years. They are taking care of the cows. So they go to the farm and help out there, and they've done park beautification projects. They go and serve at Covenant Kitchen. And actually this year we started a service learning group with high schoolers as well, going in. But this is and it's actually a nice program for kids who are not necessarily sports kids, and they're not necessarily theater kids. And it's a great way to learn how to give back in your community and how good that feels. And then we do some service learning along with it too. There's 2 social workers that run the program. So they'll be very happy about a van. Pardon?
You have 2 social workers who run the program if the 2 social worker positions are filled.
Right. Otherwise, it could be me out there.
Okay.
Taking care of the horses, but yes, absolutely. It's a great way also to keep in touch with the kids over the summer, when school's out. And again, we have this transition program that we run that's Challenge by Choice over the summer that ends in a camping trip. So that's our goal program. And other programs, we have a Mother-Daughter Circle program that's going on. It's actually a program to help moms and daughters communicate better and, learn from other groups of mothers and daughters. We have lunch check-ins at the different schools so that the kids can stop by and, if they have a little something that they might want to talk to one of our social workers or our interns, they can. And My Voice, which I love, this is one of their public service announcements that they don't get lost in the hype that they did on vaping. So they do marketing programs, commercials, that kind of stuff to work on prevention programs. And the cost of all of that is paid for by one of the grants we get. And our biggest one that you might have more questions about is our diversion program, which has been highly successful. We have a number of incredible success stories with kids who were able to kind of re-engage and not only kind of understand the harm that was caused, but make peace with who or what, and do some service learning, and then work with, both their parents as well as our social staff to come to work through some of those issues. So And having it be a regional effort helps us because if the kids get in trouble at the high school and it's kids in other towns, we're able to work. So now we're going to be eligible for a grant to help out with that as well. So I know this was a highly desirable program that the council really was very supportive, and we're very happy that it's been as successful as it's been and that we have this option for our youth.
Two things. Do you know how many kids went through this program in the past, say, 12 months?
So we got started in January, and I know we've had 8.
Okay. And I'm assuming this is a stock photograph. This is not a
This
photograph.
is not our, no, this is a
Okay.
stock, and these are not at Mansfield residents. This is a stock photograph.
Yeah, good.
You'll notice the ones that involve Mansfield, the backs, like they're
Yes.
showing their shirts. I will say, we do get, some of the kids will sign, and parents sign release, try to be very about that, so yes. Any questions? I know it's late, and I went through a lot of material.
Counselors? How are our job searches going?
Jobs, right. Particularly for mental health professionals and direct service people like drivers and kitchen staff, and so.
Are the position, are we offering attractive positions so that,
A lot of attractive positions out there right now. I
Okay.
will be honest with you. I have never seen so many town positions open.
Right.
Normally they tend to be considered prime positions, and you'll see one, in a year because someone retired there's a lot out there.
and I also noticed that very few of your staff have degrees beyond bachelor's degrees.
Not our clinical, our social workers that do
Right.
have
Um,
degrees. We have a bachelor's level, bachelor's level position, which is that casework outreach level, and then we have a master's level. So it is hard to get master's level people right now. Very hard. So that's where that's probably the biggest challenge right now. And even my position, there would have been a time that you'd have hundreds of applications. I'm not guessing, based on what I'm seeing with recruitments, that will probably be the case. So all you need is one good person, though.
yeah. Mr. Sharon?
Just a question, something I've been thinking about the past 2 weeks, because we were talking about the panhandler situation. When you have somebody who doesn't come to you, but appears to be in need, do you have outreach services to kind of get to that person?
We absolutely do. We have that outreach mode. I can say it's a little more complex with panhandlers than one might think. So just a complex. Even, every town, city, I don't care where it is, has homeless. They have people with severe mental health issues or substance abuse issues that are just a real challenge to reach and get to. So we make every effort, to not wait for people to come into our office and respond to when we get calls or contacts.
Has anybody gone out to the people who are panhandling in front of Big Y? I mean, that one is definitely in town, and we
yeah.
know there are people who stand there.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really discuss that because of confidentiality. I could say that we make every effort to reach out to if there are, people that are identified that we need to do that. So.
Any other questions?
I was just going to
Aylesworth?
add back to your comment or question about recruitment and vacancies. I may have said this the last meeting, but just to go on the record saying it again if I already said it before, but kind of priority one right now for Lee in his capacity as interim HR director is recruitments. He definitely is aware, because we've laid out for him that, while I think Pat said, this is something all towns are seeing. It's kind of factors beyond our immediate sort of circle of control, but we have more recruitments now by like an order of magnitude than the average, snapshot in time has ever been in the past. So it's definitely priorities, I think 1, 2, and 3 right now is get these positions filled, and not just with any warm body. Obviously, we want
Right.
to find the right person, but there's a lot that HR is responsible for, but we need, none of the critical work that we need to get done will get done if we don't have people to do it.
Any other questions on human services? Well, thank you for sticking with us for so long this evening. The next item on the agenda is reports of council committees. Does finance have anything to report?
We did not meet this.
Personnel, is there anything to report beyond the executive session this
No,
evening?
only that we had our meeting and we made a proposal that.
Okay.
Executive.
And committee on committees?
We are meeting on Thursday, 6 o'clock.
All right. Departmental and advisory committee reports. Has anything on petitions, requests, and communications? I got a thank you note from President March for thanking her for that letter. All right, anything for future agendas? All right, then I will take a motion to go into executive session. Mr. Shuren will move.
I move that we go into executive, in accordance with 1-200 for the purpose of town manager performance review.
And who should be in the room?
The members of the council, and Mayor, you have a thought about that.
Yes, I have thought that if we conclude the council's work on the town manager's review, that we might be able to call him back into the meeting as long as we are not going on forever and ever. And I've asked both Mr. Shuren and Mr. Aylesworth if they would agree to that, and they have both said yes. So we'll see how the initial presentation goes, and if we are moving along quickly, we will ask Mr. Aylesworth to return, if that's okay with him. I am leaving on Saturday, and I would really, my hope was that I could cut out one meeting this week, and if we could do what we were going to do with him in person this week in executive session, which is where it appropriately is, it would solve a problem. It's a purely personal request. I know, that's why I'm hoping that we do this quickly. But he also has a spouse at home who may not have been in bed for the past 2 hours. Okay, all those in favor of going into executive session, please raise your hand. All right, we're in executive session. We'll wait till everybody clears out. We will proceed.